Number 1. The door-in-the-face technique. Imagine you're walking down the street and a charity worker comes up to you and asks, "Would you be willing to donate $500 to help struggling families?" That's a huge ask. You probably hesitate, feel a bit uncomfortable, and then say no. But then they immediately follow up with something like, "Okay, totally understandable. How about just $20? Suddenly that second request feels much smaller and way more reasonable. And without even realizing what just happened, you're reaching into your pocket and handing over the money. You've just experienced one of psychology's most powerful compliance tricks, the door-in-the-face technique. This strategy works because of something hardwired into human behavior, reciprocal concessions. When someone makes a big request and then backs off with a smaller one, we naturally feel like we should meet them halfway, as if we owe them something just for compromising. Psychologists have tested this technique in many studies. In one famous experiment, researchers first asked students to volunteer 2 hours a week for 2 years at a juvenile detention center. Unsurprisingly, everyone said no, but then the researchers immediately followed up with a smaller ask. Would you at least be willing to chaperone a group of kids on a one-day trip to the zoo? 3 times more students said yes to this smaller request, compared to when the zoo trip was asked as a standalone favor. Why? Because after turning down something extreme, the second request felt like no big deal. And this technique isn't limited to psychology experiments, it's everywhere. In negotiations, for example, a salesperson might start with a ridiculously high price, only to generously lower it to the number they actually wanted all along. You feel like you got a bargain, but really, you just got played. It's also used in law enforcement and interrogation rooms. A detective might throw a wild accusation at a suspect, maybe even suggest a life-ruining punishment, and then offer a reduced charge if they confess. That lesser charge suddenly feels like an escape, but in reality, it's a trap. On a more sinister level, this same principle is used by manipulative people and controlling organizations. Cults, abusive partners, and high-control groups often start by demanding something extreme: total obedience or a painful sacrifice, knowing it's too much. But when they follow up with something that seems smaller, like just a little loyalty or one small compromise, it feels manageable. And suddenly, you're in, because the real trick isn't getting what they asked for. It's making you believe you wanted to say yes. Number 2, hoovering, the manipulation that pulls you back in. One of the most deceptive manipulation tactics doesn't come in the form of anger or threats. It doesn't push you away. It pulls you back in right when you're about to break free. It's called hoovering. This tactic is designed to suck you right back into a toxic cycle, just when you thought it was finally over. The name comes from the Hoover vacuum cleaner, and because that's exactly what it does. It draws you back in, just as you're gaining some distance. It's used by narcissists, emotional abusers, and manipulators who can't stand the idea of losing control over you. And it works because it preys on something very human: hope. The hope that this time maybe things will be different. Take Charles Manson, for example. When members of his cult tried to leave, he didn't always use threats. Instead, he pulled them back in with affection, validation, and a false sense of belonging. He made them feel special, irreplaceable. He convinced them that the world outside could never understand them like he did. His goal wasn't just to get them back, and it was to make them willingly give up control all over again. Hoovering doesn't always look the same. It can take many forms. The love bomb. Hoover, suddenly the manipulator is overflowing with affection. They say they've changed. They send you songs you used to love. They bring up old memories. They act like the person you wished they were, but only long enough to get you back. The pity Hoover? If love doesn't work, they try guilt. They say they're struggling. They're sick, depressed, in crisis. They don't ask you to come back, but they make sure you feel awful if you don't. The anger Hoover, and if guilt doesn't work, they lash out. They blame you, call you heartless. Post online about how great their life is now. All to make you react, because the goal isn't to move on. It's to keep you emotionally hooked, and that's why it works. The brain craves closure. Every act of kindness makes you forget the cruelty. Every act of cruelty makes you crave the kindness again. It's not one trick. It's a repeating cycle, a psychological tug of war that keeps you stuck. So how do you escape it? You recognize it for what it is. Not a real attempt to reconnect, but a control tactic. Once you see it clearly, it loses its grip. Cut off contact, don't explain, don't respond. Hoovering only works if you respond. Without a reaction, the manipulator loses power. Walking away is hard, but staying in the cycle, that's where the real damage happens. Number 3, the Zeigarnik effect, the brain's obsession with the unfinished. Ever notice how an unfinished task stays stuck in your mind like an itch you can't scratch? A song that cuts off before the last chorus, or a movie that ends right before the climax, it drives you crazy. That's the Zeigarnik effect, and it's one of the most unsettling psychological tricks ever discovered. Now imagine someone weaponize that feeling, deliberately leaving things unfinished, just to keep you hooked, anxious, desperate for closure. That's not just a psychological quirk anymore, that's manipulation. The effect is named after Bluma Zeigarnik, a Soviet psychologist who noticed something odd while watching waiters in a cafe. They could remember every detail of unpaid orders, but forgot everything the moment the bill was settled. In other words, our brains obsess over unfinished business. Loose ends demand our attention, and marketers know this. Think about your favorite shows. Why does every episode end on a cliffhanger? Because your brain hates incompleteness? It fixates on it and makes you crave the resolution. That's why we binge watch entire seasons. It's not just entertainment, it's a trap. But the darkest part? Manipulators use this too. Cult leaders, toxic bosses, abusive partners, they leave things unresolved on purpose. A boss keeps promising that promotion, but never delivers. A narcissist ghosts you mid-conversation, so you're left begging for answers. A political leader stirs up fear, but never offers a solution. The tactic is always the same. Leave the brain hanging, and it'll keep chasing the answer forever. And most people never even realize it's happening. Number 4, scarcity. Why we crave what we can't have. Have you ever noticed how when something seems limited or exclusive, you suddenly want it more? Doesn't matter what it is, a luxury car, a rare sneaker, someone's attention. If it feels scarce, it instantly feels valuable. That's the psychology of scarcity. One of the most heavily exploited tricks in the world. Just look at Black Friday. Every year, people push and trample each other to grab discounted TVs or microwaves, not because they need them, but because they're told there aren't many left. Stores create this illusion of high demand by faking scarcity, and it works. When something feels scarce, your survival instincts kick in. Thousands of years ago, scarcity meant life or death. If food or shelter was limited, you fought for it. That instinct still exists today. So when something feels rare, your brain tells you, go get it, even if you don't need it. That's why luxury brands limit production. The fewer handbags there are, the more people want them. That's why influencers hide content behind paywalls. The exclusivity makes it feel more valuable. Even dating apps feed off this. When someone is hard to get, they become irresistible. But this trick goes way beyond products. It's been used to control entire societies. Totalitarian regimes restrict access to information, making people desperate for the truth. Cult leaders claim only they hold the answers, and the outside world has nothing to offer. And here's the disturbing part. Scarcity makes people stop thinking clearly. When you think something is slipping away, you forget to ask if you even want it in the first place. Number 5, the placebo effect. They gave you a pill. You took it without question. And just moments later, the pain began to ease. Relief flowed through your body, your system responding exactly as expected. But what if I told you that pill was pure sugar, no drugs, no therapeutic chemicals, and yet your brain accepted it as real medicine, so your body followed suit? This is known as the placebo effect, one of the most baffling and disturbing psychological revelations ever uncovered. It demonstrates that belief, on its own, can physically alter the body. And while it might seem like an odd psychological curiosity, the truth lurking behind it is far more sinister than it appears. Let's begin with a case that's often cited. Back in the 1950s, there was a man named Mr. Wright who was dying of late-stage cancer. Out of sheer desperation, his doctor administered what was believed to be a revolutionary new treatment. What happened next seemed impossible. His tumors rapidly diminished. He appeared to make a total recovery, but here's where it twists. The miracle drug didn't actually work at all. Once Mr. Wright discovered the truth, his illness came crashing back, and not long after, he passed away. That's the sheer force of belief. When the mind is convinced of a cure, the body can be tricked into healing itself. Research has shown that people given fake pain pills release real pain-relieving chemicals. Simulated surgeries, where doctors only pretend to operate, can lead to true improvements in physical health. Even individuals with Parkinson's have experienced noticeable relief simply because they believed they had been medicated. But here's where the story turns from strange to deeply disturbing. This mental mechanism can be turned into a weapon. If belief is powerful enough to restore, it's also powerful enough to destroy. This darker version is known as the nocebo effect, the malevolent sibling of the placebo. Instead of instilling the idea that you're recovering, it implants the belief that you're deteriorating. Tell someone a completely harmless tablet will cause harm, and their body will create very real reactions. Stomach cramps, migraines, even the symptoms of genuine illness, and this isn't just theoretical, it's historical. In some voodoo traditions, practitioners have cursed individuals to death, and those victims died because they genuinely believed the curse would kill them. In the world of medical fraud, scammers have sold bogus treatments, giving false hope to desperate people, allowing disease to spread undetected until it's far too late. And in modern-day drug testing trials, participants sometimes suffer severe symptoms, not because of the actual medication, but because their brains anticipated them. Now pause and really consider what this suggests. If belief alone can alter your biological state, then how often have you been unknowingly manipulated? How many times have your pain, your healing, your suffering, or your recovery been influenced not by what actually happened, but by what you expected to happen? And more importantly, who's been crafting those expectations? Let's dig into something called framing. Number 6, framing effect manipulation. Picture yourself entering a grocery store. You spot one product labeled 90% fat-free yogurt. Seems like a healthy pick, right? Now glance over and see the same item, different label, contains 10% fat. Suddenly, that second one doesn't sound so appealing. Even though it's exactly the same thing, that's the framing effect, a psychological illusion that doesn't change the data. Just how your brain interprets it. And this minor linguistic twist, it can completely override your logical thinking. Maybe you're thinking, so what? That's just smart advertising. But it's much more than that. Framing doesn't just sway what you eat. It manipulates your politics. It sculpts your worldview and it stirs your emotions without you ever noticing. Here's a famous example. A government proposes a strategy to fight a lethal outbreak. When people are told, this approach will save 200 lives, they overwhelmingly support it. But when they're told, this same approach will allow 400 people to die, support plummets. Same numbers, same outcome, different reaction, because of different wording, but framing goes beyond facts. It bends morality too. Take a polarizing debate. Label one faction as pro-life, the other as pro-choice. Notice how each term is loaded with positivity. No one wants to be called anti-life or anti-choice. The way something is labeled can trigger moral alignment before you even explore the issue itself. And this is where the danger sharpens. Framing doesn't just guide opinions, it manufactures truth. Picture two headlines covering the same event. Protesters march for justice in the streets. Angry mobs riot across the city. Exact same event, completely opposite emotional responses. Read the first, you'll likely feel empathy. Read the second, you'll likely feel fear. This is how institutions, from media outlets to governments to corporations, shape your beliefs and behaviors. Without ever having to falsify anything, they don't need to lie, they just need to reframe. Control the narrative, and you control the response. But it goes even further. Think about how this plays out in your personal life. Ever had someone say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," instead of, "I'm sorry for what I did"? That's a subtle form of framing. It gently shifts the blame away from the action and puts it on your reaction. Or picture a controlling partner saying, "I just want what's best for you," instead of, "I don't want you making your own decisions." Same control, different mask. One paints them as a protector. The other reveals them as a manipulator. And once a frame has been placed, it's incredibly hard to escape from it. If you're told someone is difficult, everything they do is filtered through that expectation. If a brand markets their product as luxury, you'll convince yourself it's superior, even when it's identical to a budget version. Framing doesn't distort reality. It distorts how you perceive reality. And once someone takes hold of your perception, they don't have to force you to act. You'll act on your own. Number 7, emotional contagious exploitation. Have you ever walked into a space and immediately sensed the emotional tone? Maybe a tense atmosphere made you nervous, or someone's laughter instantly lightened your mood. That's not coincidence. That's emotional contagion, a subconscious process where feelings are transferred from one person to another. Humans are built to mirror. It's how we connect and communicate. If someone near you is agitated, your brain silently absorbs it through body cues, voice, posture, expression. Before long, you're carrying their emotion as if it were your own. This happens beneath awareness. You don't even realize it's happening, which is precisely what makes it so dangerous. Consider this chilling example: mass hysteria. Think about the Salem witch trials. One person expresses fear, another reacts, and soon an entire community spirals into madness. No one stops to verify, they just respond to the wave of emotion surging through the crowd. This phenomenon has played out in economic collapses, violent protests, even cult behavior. When the group panics, you panic too, not because of facts, but because of emotional atmosphere. Skilled manipulators weaponize this. They don't need to command you. They just need to project an emotion you can't resist. A confident speaker can make people ignore obvious lies. A narcissist faking sadness can trap someone in guilt. A hyped-up salesman can make you feel urgently interested in something worthless. Even fake emotions can ignite real ones. A manipulator doesn't have to feel fear, anger, or joy. They just have to act like they do, and you'll respond as if it were real. Once you're caught in their emotional current, your reasoning dims. That's how political leaders whip crowds into blind loyalty. It's how cult heads gain unshakable control, and how toxic partners keep their victims stuck. Whoever controls the emotional climate controls everyone inside it. So next time you're overwhelmed with a feeling that came out of nowhere, pause and ask, did I create this emotion, or did someone else plant it? Because not every feeling you experience belongs to you. Number 8, exploiting mirror neurons. You yawn when someone else yawns. You laugh when the room around you erupts in laughter. But your brain isn't just observing, it's mirroring. This reflex, so natural and automatic, is what bonds us to each other. It's the glue of human connection, but disturbingly, that same instinct can be turned against you in ways you might never see coming. At the heart of this subtle form of manipulation are mirror neurons. These are specialized brain cells that fire not only when you perform an action, but also when you watch someone else do it. They're why you flinch when someone gets hurt, why you instinctively smile back when someone smiles at you. They are the biological foundation of empathy, bonding, and influence. But like any powerful mechanism, they can be weaponized. Take one of history's darkest examples, the rise of Adolf Hitler. He didn't just deliver speeches, he embodied the crowd's emotions. He mirrored their fears, their frustrations, their hopes, and then reflected it all back at them. His words weren't crafted to persuade with logic. They were carefully designed emotional loops, amplified by the crowd's reaction until reason gave way to pure feeling. Because when emotion takes over, critical thinking takes a back seat. But here's the thing. Mirroring doesn't require an arena full of thousands. Salespeople use it. Politicians, cult leaders, scammers, they all do. A manipulator will subtly imitate your posture, match your tone, mimic your gestures, just enough to make you feel safe. Your brain, wired for connection, picks up on these cues. And without realizing it, you think, this person is like me. I can trust them. That's how con artists get strangers to confess their secrets just minutes after meeting. They're not merely listening, they're feeding your own behavior back to you, and it goes even deeper. Mirroring doesn't just create comfort. It can manufacture attraction, it can simulate intimacy, it can create loyalty out of thin air. Studies show that when someone copies your body language, even subtly, you're more likely to like them, to trust them, to agree with what they're saying even if you've never met before. This is exactly how toxic relationships take root. An abuser may begin by mirroring your personality, your interests, your values. They create the illusion of a perfect match, and once you're emotionally hooked, the game changes. They stop mirroring. They start controlling, because now they know you're too emotionally invested to leave. But this isn't just a human trick. It's a system trick too. Social media algorithms act like digital mirror neurons. Ever noticed how your feed seems to show exactly what you already think and feel? That's no coincidence. These platforms reflect your beliefs right back at you. They reinforce your worldview, amplify your opinions, and filter out anything that might challenge them. Over time, this doesn't just build comfort. It builds echo chambers, polarization. A distorted reality where the only perspective you see is your own. So, how do you protect yourself? First, recognize when you're being mirrored. If someone mimics your behavior a little too closely, if they reflect your emotions just a little too perfectly, pause. Ask yourself why. Second, break the rhythm. Change your posture. Shift the conversation. Introduce an unexpected thought. A genuine person will flow with that naturally. A manipulator, they'll stumble, because they rely on predictability to maintain their grip. Mirror neurons are part of what makes us human. They help us learn. They help us care. They help us connect. But in the wrong hands, they become tools of deception, turning your own empathy into a weapon and using it against you. The scariest part? When it's done right, you won't even notice it's happening. Number 9, divide and conquer. Two people, once inseparable, begin to drift apart. They start questioning each other, mistrusting each other, not because of anything either of them did, but because someone else wanted it that way. A rumor here, a twisted truth there, little calculated moves meant to drive a wedge between them. And once that wedge is deep enough, the person who caused it all quietly takes control. This is divide and conquer, a time-tested manipulation strategy that has controlled people for centuries. It dismantles alliances, it weakens resistance, it strengthens power for the one orchestrating it all. History is full of examples. The British Empire used this tactic to maintain control over its colonies, turning communities against each other so no one could unite to resist them. Authoritarian leaders use it too, fueling divisions among citizens through politics, culture, or manufactured outrage, to keep the public distracted and disorganized. But this strategy isn't just for emperors and dictators, it's happening in everyday life. A manipulative boss will turn coworkers against one another, so no one feels safe enough to challenge authority. A toxic partner might stir conflict between you and your loved ones, until they become the only voice you trust. Narcissists thrive on this. They spread just enough misinformation to ensure that no two people around them can truly bond. Because connection is a threat to their control, the key is isolation. When you don't trust anyone else, you start depending on the manipulator. You seek validation from the person who broke your trust in the first place. And once that dependency is formed, control becomes effortless. What's even more chilling? They rarely need to tell outright lies, just a bit of context left out. A truth twisted at just the right moment. An exaggeration dropped when it hurts the most, that's all it takes. Friends become enemies. Allies turn suspicious. And the manipulator stands untouched, hidden in plain sight. Number 10, loss aversion. Imagine two scenarios. In one, you're told you'll gain $100. In the other, you're told you'll lose $100. Which one affects you more? If you're like most people, losing that money feels way worse. Almost twice as bad as gaining it feels good. That's loss aversion, a psychological trick that makes us fear losing far more than we desire winning. And that fear controls far more of your life than you probably realize. Think about casinos. They've mastered this principle. When you win, bright lights flash, music plays. Your brain is flooded with dopamine, but when you lose, silence, no drama, no alarms. Because they know your brain is already hurting. They don't need to add to it. And yet, people don't walk away. They chase the loss. They keep playing, desperate to get back what they lost, even if it means losing more. But loss aversion doesn't stop at gambling. It's in marketing. It's in relationships, it's in politics. Why do online stores say only 2 left in stock? Why do you see countdown timers and flash sales everywhere? Because the idea of missing out makes your brain panic. You might not even want the product, but now that it might disappear, you feel like you have to have it. Now take this a step further. In abusive relationships, manipulators weaponize loss aversion. They don't make you fear what they give. They make you fear what they could take away. They convince you that without them, you'll be alone, you'll be unloved, you'll be broken. It's not happiness that keeps people trapped. It's fear of what leaving might cost. And if you think you're immune, you're not. Every day, advertisers, politicians, and platforms exploit this same fear. Act now or miss out forever. Your rights are being taken away. Everyone else is getting ahead of you. The world isn't just offering you choices. It's making you terrified to choose the wrong one. So ask yourself, how many decisions have you truly made for yourself? And how many were just you trying to avoid losing something? Number 11, priming effects. You walk into a store. Soft classical music is playing in the background. Suddenly you feel a little more refined, maybe even a bit more willing to splurge. Later that day, you're at a restaurant and the menu is written in an elegant cursive font. Almost instinctively, the more expensive dishes start looking more appealing. You think you're making these decisions freely? But the truth is, you've just been primed. Priming is one of the most subtle yet powerful psychological tricks out there. It's the process of planting an idea into your mind without your awareness, making you more likely to think, feel, or act a certain way. No force, no persuasion, not even conscious awareness. Just a quiet whisper to your subconscious, guiding your choices before you even know you're making them. One of the most famous examples? The old age experiment. Researchers asked participants to unscramble sentences using words like wrinkled, bingo, and Florida. Then they timed how long it took those participants to walk down a hallway. Those exposed to the age-related words walked significantly slower. They didn't know why. Their minds had been primed to feel older, and their bodies responded accordingly. And it's not just experiments. This trick is everywhere. Supermarkets place fresh flowers near the entrance, not for decoration, but to make you associate the store with freshness and quality. Political ads repeat the same phrases endlessly until those words feel familiar and therefore more believable. Even job interviewers aren't immune. If they read about failure earlier in the day, they may unconsciously judge a candidate more harshly. Priming works because your brain loves patterns. It's constantly searching for connections, even when none exist. If you hear the word yellow, your brain will recognize banana faster than if it had heard an unrelated word. If you see a brand's logo often enough, you'll start to feel like you trust that company, even if you've never used their product. But here's where it gets darker. Priming doesn't just nudge your preferences, it can control narratives. It shapes perception. News headlines deliberately choose words that set the tone before you even read the article. A crime story that uses the word youth instead of gang immediately feels different. A company that calls layoffs right-sizing makes job losses sound like strategic evolution rather than economic failure. And it gets worse. In legal settings, a single word can change a verdict. When witnesses are asked, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other? They estimate higher speeds than if asked, how fast was it going when it bumped into the other? That one word, smashed, alters memory itself. Your social media feed, a non-stop priming machine. Every like, every suggested post, every trending headline, it's all shaping your thinking before you form your own opinion. Even the font or background color can influence emotion. Studies show that people primed with the color red tend to perform worse on tests, likely because red is subconsciously tied to danger and correction. And the most dangerous part, once you've been primed, you rarely question it. If you're primed to see someone as untrustworthy, you'll interpret everything they do through that filter. If you're primed to expect a bad experience, your brain will find a reason to confirm it. Priming doesn't just influence a moment, it reshapes how you see reality. So ask yourself this. How many of your thoughts are really yours? And how many were planted before you even realized it? Number 12, the power of touch. The warmth of a handshake, a gentle pat on the back, the soft brush of fingertips on your arm. These tiny, almost invisible gestures might seem harmless, just casual parts of everyday life. But what if I told you they could control your thoughts, influence your decisions, even change how you see the world? This is the power of touch. A psychological weapon so subtle most people never even realize it's being used against them. Yet it can shape behavior in ways that are almost impossible to resist. Take one classic experiment. Restaurant waiters were told to lightly touch customers on the shoulder or forearm when returning their change. The result? Tips jumped by up to 40%. In another study, job interviewers gave candidates a simple handshake. Those who received a firm, confident touch were consistently rated as more competent and more hireable, regardless of their actual performance. Why does this happen? Because touch is the most ancient form of communication. Long before speech, before language, before writing, humans used touch to bond, to comfort, to signal status. And that ancient instinct still runs deep. Touch builds subconscious trust. It creates connection. Even if you don't consciously notice it, your brain does. It associates touch with warmth, familiarity, and authority. Research even shows that if a doctor lightly touches your arm while giving a diagnosis, you're more likely to believe them and follow their advice. That's why politicians shake hands obsessively. Why salespeople gently touch your elbow. It's not just friendliness, it's strategy. Now here's where it gets dark. This effect works, even when you don't want it to. Studies show that even unwanted touch, as long as it's not aggressive, can lower your ability to resist persuasion. Manipulators know this. Con artists, cult leaders, even skilled interrogators use touch to break defenses. A cult leader might gently place a hand on your shoulder while speaking, making you feel bonded to them. A scammer might brush your arm casually as they talk, making you more cooperative. You won't notice, but your subconscious already has. Touch is also used in power games. Ever notice how powerful people, CEOs, politicians, often place a hand on someone's back as they walk through a door? That's not just politeness, it's a physical cue. I'm in control here. And more often than not, the person being touched accepts that dominance without even realizing it. But here's the most disturbing part. Even knowing all of this doesn't make you immune. Your brain is still wired to respond the same way. The next time someone touches your arm, you'll still feel a flicker of trust or comfort. You might question it later, but by then, your guard is already down. So the next time you feel a touch on your shoulder, a hand brushing your sleeve, or unfamiliar warmth in a handshake, pause. Ask yourself, was that an accident, or was it a carefully placed move to make you just a little more obedient? Number 13, exploiting mirror neurons. You yawn when someone else yawns. You laugh when everyone around you starts laughing, even if you didn't hear the joke. That's not coincidence. Your brain isn't just observing, it's mirroring. This instinct is the foundation of human connection. But it can also be turned against you in ways you'd never expect. At the core of this manipulation are mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that activate not just when you do something, but when you see someone else do it. They make you flinch when someone gets hurt. They make you smile when someone smiles. They're the foundation of empathy, bonding, and social influence. But like any powerful tool, they can be weaponized. One of the most chilling examples, Adolf Hitler. He didn't just give speeches, he mirrored the emotions of his audience. He took their fears, frustrations, and hopes and reflected them back. His words weren't just persuasive. They were emotional feedback loops, amplified by the crowd's energy. He didn't argue with logic. He made people feel, and once emotion takes over, critical thinking shuts down. But mirroring doesn't need a massive crowd. Salespeople, cult leaders, not con artists. Politicians, they all use it. A manipulator will subtly copy your posture, your gestures, even your tone. And without realizing it, your brain goes, they're like me. And if they're like me, I can trust them. That's how con artists can make you open up to them just minutes after meeting. They're not just talking, they're reflecting you. It goes deeper. Mirroring can even manufacture attraction. Loyalty studies show that when someone mimics your body language, you're more likely to trust them, like them, and agree with them, even if you barely know them. This is how toxic relationships begin. An abuser may start by mirroring their victim's personality, values, and interests, creating the illusion of perfect compatibility. But once emotional attachment is locked in, the mirroring stops. Control begins. By then, it's too late. And it's not just people using this tactic. Entire systems do it. Social media algorithms are digital mirror neurons. They feed you content that aligns with your existing beliefs, not by accident, but by design. The more you see what you already agree with, the stronger your biases become. Over time, this creates echo chambers, polarization, and a dangerous inability to see other perspectives. So how do you protect yourself? First, recognize when you're being mirrored. If someone's matching your tone, your body language, your emotions too perfectly, pause. Ask yourself, is this genuine? Second, disrupt the pattern, shift your posture, change the subject, throw in something unexpected. A real person will roll with it. A manipulator will stumble. Mirror neurons are what make us human. They help us connect, learn, empathize. But in the wrong hands, they turn your own instincts against you. And the scariest part, when done well, you'll never even realize it's happening. Number 14, the halo effect. First impressions are powerful. But what if I told you they don't just shape how we feel about someone? They distort everything we see? That's the halo effect. It's a psychological trick so subtle yet so manipulative that it can make someone seem smarter, kinder, or even more trustworthy than they actually are, simply because of one positive trait. And once that halo is in place, it's almost impossible to shake off its influence. Imagine you're sitting in a courtroom watching two different defendants on trial for the same crime. One is well-dressed, articulate, and confident. The other, disheveled, anxious, avoiding eye contact. Without knowing a single fact about the case, who seems more guilty to you? Studies show that attractive, confident individuals are far more likely to be perceived as innocent. Meanwhile, those who appear nervous or unpolished are assumed to be guilty, even if the evidence says otherwise. That's the halo effect at work. It happens because the human brain craves shortcuts. Rather than evaluate every trait independently, we grab onto one standout quality, like attractiveness, charm, or intelligence, and assume everything else must match. If someone is physically attractive, we subconsciously believe they're kind, competent, and honest. If they speak with confidence, we assume they know what they're talking about. If they're in a position of power, we assume they earned it. It's why politicians win elections based on charisma instead of policy. It's why manipulators get away with lies, and it's why strong, authoritative figures are followed blindly, even when their actions are questionable. But the halo effect doesn't just affect perception, it actively shapes reality. Think about media coverage. Celebrities admired for their talent often get the benefit of the doubt when scandals emerge. Meanwhile, those already viewed negatively are instantly condemned. No questions asked. It's not logic. It's the halo distorting judgment. Marketers know this better than anyone. That's why luxury brands use attractive, well-dressed models in their ads. It's not just about the product. It's about selling an illusion. If you associate their brand with beauty and status, you'll assume the product itself is superior. You're not just buying a car or a suit, you're buying what surrounds it, prestige. But here's the darker side of the halo effect. It shields dangerous people from scrutiny. Charismatic leaders can hide corruption behind charm. Manipulative partners make you overlook red flags just because they seem caring at first. Even history's darkest figures often had an aura of leadership that blinded people until it was too late. That's what makes the halo effect so insidious. It doesn't just fool you, it makes you confident in your wrong judgment. And once you believe the illusion, you'll defend it, even when facts contradict it. You'll hear things like, he's a good guy, he wouldn't do that. She's so charming, she must be telling the truth. Breaking free from the halo effect means going against instinct. It means questioning first impressions. Looking past charm, status, and appearances to ask, what am I not seeing? Because sometimes the people who shine the brightest are just casting the longest shadows. Number 15, lowballing. You walk into a car dealership thrilled to buy your first car. A smiling salesperson greets you and says, good news, we have a special deal today. This car, fully loaded, just $20,000. That's within your budget. You shake hands, feel the excitement building. You're already imagining yourself driving it. Maybe you even text your friends about the deal. But just as you're about to sign the paperwork, the salesperson pauses. I just spoke to my manager. Turns out I made a mistake. That price doesn't include some mandatory fees. It's actually $23,000. At this point, you're already committed in your mind. You've emotionally bought the car. So instead of walking away, you agree to the new price. You just got lowballed. This psychological trick is brutally effective. It works by getting you to commit before revealing the true cost. And once you've decided, even if you were misled, you become emotionally invested. Backing out now feels like a loss. One famous study proved this. Researchers asked college students to join a study. Most said yes, but only after agreeing were they told it would require them to show up at 7 at an inconvenient time. Still, most stuck with their original decision. Lowballing isn't just for car sales. It happens in job offers, negotiations, even relationships. A recruiter might promise a dream job with a great salary, only for the final offer to sneak in extra hours, lower pay, or more responsibility. But by then you're hooked. In more manipulative environments, like cults or extremist groups, lowballing becomes a tool for control. It starts with small, harmless requests. Just attend a seminar, or come meet a few people. But once someone commits, the demands escalate. And by the time they realize how deep they've gone, it's already too late. Because here's the real danger of lowballing. It's not just about losing money. It's about losing control. Number 16, cognitive dissonance amplification. People will defend something, even when it's wrong, even when it hurts them, even when reality is screaming at them to stop. But it's not just stubbornness. It's a psychological trap, a mental war zone where, without even realizing it, you start justifying your own suffering. This is cognitive dissonance amplification, one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation. designed to make people double down instead of walk away. Cognitive dissonance happens when someone holds two conflicting beliefs at the same time. It creates a deep discomfort that your mind desperately wants to resolve. Imagine being loyal to a relationship, a belief system, or a leader, only to see clear proof that it's harmful or false. The logical response would be to leave, but most people don't. Instead, they justify. They twist the narrative. They make reality fit their belief because facing the truth would mean admitting they wasted time, trust, maybe even their identity on a lie. One of the most disturbing examples, the Heaven's Gate cult. Members believed they would ascend to an extraterrestrial afterlife. When their leader's prediction failed, when the spaceship never came, did they question the belief? No, their faith got stronger. They convinced themselves it was a test of loyalty. And the more they sacrificed, the harder it became to leave. Until in 1997, that belief ended in mass suicide. But this isn't just about cults. It happens everywhere. The trick is escalation. A manipulator starts small, a little contradiction here, a small unethical act there. Something that feels off, but not bad enough to walk away. A toxic boss asks for one dishonest favor. You justify it. I need this job. Then the asks get bigger. And before you know it, you're trapped in something you never would have agreed to in the beginning. Abusive relationships work the same way. It starts with small manipulations, subtle shifts in how you see yourself. Little moments of confusion, you rationalize it. They didn't mean it, or maybe it was my fault. Each justification locks you in deeper, because to admit the truth means admitting you stayed. And it's not just individuals. Entire societies fall for this. Political or ideological groups that show their true darker sides still gain defenders. Not because the supporters don't see the hypocrisy, but because admitting they were fooled feels worse than clinging to the lie. So how do you escape it? First, recognize when your mind is fighting reality. Ask yourself, am I defending this because it's true, or because I don't want to admit I was wrong? Second, step back. Distance yourself emotionally. When you're too close, you can't see clearly. Review the facts as if they happened to someone else. Cognitive dissonance is natural. But when it's amplified by manipulation, it can turn even the most logical person into a prisoner of their own thoughts. And the scariest part? The more you fight to prove you're right, the deeper you fall into the trap. The only way out? Stop defending, start questioning. Number 17, groupthink induction. One of the most dangerous psychological manipulations doesn't target individuals. It targets entire groups. It doesn't force agreement. It creates an atmosphere where disagreement feels like betrayal. And once that atmosphere settles in, people stop thinking critically, even when the decisions being made are clearly flawed. Picture a high-stakes corporate meeting. A company is about to launch a new product, but every sign points to disaster. Market research says customers won't buy it. Engineers flag major technical issues. A few executives have private doubts, but in the room, nothing but agreement. No one raises a hand. No one challenges the decision, not because they don't see the red flags, but because no one wants to be the only one who speaks up. This is groupthink, a psychological trap where the desire for unity overrides logic, skepticism, and even self-preservation. When people belong to a group, they instinctively prioritize harmony. Doubt makes you feel like an outsider. Dissent becomes uncomfortable, and the louder, more confident voices, they set the tone. Everyone else follows, often without realizing it. Sometimes it starts when a leader expresses a strong opinion. Others fall in line, or maybe the group values agreement so deeply that questioning feels like disloyalty. Over time, the pressure to conform outweighs the pressure to be correct. People suppress doubts. They rationalize obviously bad ideas. They convince themselves if everyone agrees, it must be right. But the consequences? Devastating. History is packed with examples: failed military invasions, economic collapses, political disasters. Moments where, in hindsight, the problems were obvious, but no one spoke up. And the scariest part? Inside the groupthink bubble, people don't feel manipulated. They believe they're thinking for themselves. But really, they're just echoing the room. Number 18, confirmation bias reinforcement. Imagine two people watching the same news story. One believes the government is corrupt. The other thinks it's doing a great job. They both walk away from the exact same coverage, more convinced than ever that they're right. How? That's confirmation bias. A mental filter that makes you see only what supports your current beliefs and ignore everything that doesn't. And here's where it gets dangerous. Once someone understands how this bias works, they can use it to trap you inside your own belief system. Cults are masters of this. They don't try to prove their doctrine with facts. Instead, they echo the feelings you already have. If you're angry at society or feel lost, they won't argue. They'll amplify it. Feed you only the information that stokes your frustration. Eventually, you stop questioning. You only accept ideas that confirm what they want you to believe. Politicians and ideological groups use the same tactic. They don't change minds, they reinforce beliefs. That's why people fall into echo chambers and stay there. And social media? It's built on confirmation bias. If you click on one video that supports your opinion, your feed fills with more of the same. Opposing views, silenced before you ever see them. Your world starts to reflect only what you already believe, until you're convinced everyone agrees with you. And it doesn't stop at politics or religion. Think about conspiracy theories. Someone starts believing the earth is flat. Any evidence against that belief gets rejected as a government cover-up. The more you argue, the deeper they dig in. Why? Because their brain is no longer trying to find truth. It's trying to protect a belief. Marketers exploit this too. They don't convince you a product works. They find people already open to believing it, then give them hand-picked proof, glowing reviews, emotional testimonials, selective stats. Even in relationships, this happens. A toxic partner doesn't convince you they're perfect. They feed your existing fears. See? Everyone leaves you in the end. And your mind starts filtering reality to confirm those fears. Confirmation bias doesn't just make you ignore the truth, it makes you fight against it. And once you're caught in it, even facts feel like an attack. The most effective manipulators don't argue. They don't debate, they just control what you see until everything around you confirms what they want you to believe. And then, they don't need to manipulate you anymore. You'll do it yourself. Number 19, the illusion of choice. You think you're in control. You believe the decisions you make, what to eat, what to buy, who to follow, are your own. But what if they're not? What if most of your choices were crafted for you before you even realized you were choosing? This is the illusion of choice, one of the most deceptive tricks of modern manipulation. Imagine sitting down at a restaurant. You're offered 3 options: steak, pasta, or salad. You choose pasta. But did you ever question why those were the only 3 choices? Why not a burger or sushi? Your decision was limited from the start. This trick is used everywhere, from political debates to personal relationships, and it works because people rarely question what's missing. Think of supermarkets. You walk in for a loaf of bread. You walk out with chips, chocolate, and cleaning supplies you didn't need. Why? Because the store layout subtly guided your path, nudging you toward impulse buys while making you feel like you were shopping freely. Politics does the same thing. You're told to pick a side, left or right, for or against, when in reality the entire conversation was framed by someone else. Your options are just carefully selected traps. Marketers love this tactic. Ever seen pricing like this? Basic, $5, premium, $50, and gold, $30? Most people pick the $30 plan. You weren't choosing freely, you were being steered. Even in relationships, this plays out. Someone says, we can do it my way, or we break up. That's not a real choice. That's emotional control disguised as compromise. The illusion of choice thrives on one idea, that having options equals freedom. But real freedom isn't about choosing from a list, it's about asking, who wrote this list? And the most skilled manipulators, they don't need to remove your options. They just need to make you believe you were in control all along. Number 20, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Ever had a conversation where before you realized it, you were nodding along, agreeing, maybe even feeling like you trusted someone you just met? That wasn't an accident. That may have been neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, a set of psychological techniques designed to guide thoughts, emotions, and decisions without you even realizing it. At its core, NLP uses language patterns, tone, and body language to bypass your conscious filters and plant ideas directly into your subconscious. Used ethically, it's marketed as a way to improve communication, persuasion, and confidence. Used unethically, it becomes a tool for deception, manipulation, even control. One of NLP's most powerful tactics is called the embedded command. Instead of saying, trust me, the speaker might say, you might not even realize it yet, but you're already beginning to trust what I'm saying. It sounds casual, but your brain processes it as a suggestion, one you didn't resist because it didn't feel like a command. Another trick is mirroring, subtly copying your body language, tone, or pace of speech. You start to feel more connected, more at ease, more trusting, without knowing why. That's why cult leaders feel so magnetic. Why a high-pressure salesperson can earn your trust in minutes. But the most chilling NLP technique is anchoring. This is when a manipulator links a specific emotion to a phrase, a gesture, or a tone. If they consistently make you feel safe or heard while using a certain phrase, your brain stores that feeling. Later, even if they're being deceptive, that same phrase triggers the old emotion. You feel safe when you shouldn't. The most dangerous thing about NLP, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like you're just having a conversation, but underneath the surface, your mind is being steered, carefully, quietly, invisibly. And unless you know how to spot it, you'll never realize it's happening. Number 21, creating a sense of urgency. Picture this, you're browsing an online store and stumble on the perfect item. But right beneath it, a bold red timer appears. Only 2 left in stock. Sale ends in 3 minutes. Your heart rate jumps. You don't have time to think. If you hesitate, you might miss it forever. So, you buy it. Just like that, you've been manipulated. That's the power of urgency, one of the most effective psychological tricks used to override reason and push you into acting on impulse. The worst part, you rarely realize it's happening. A perfect historical example. The 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast. When Orson Welles aired a fictional alien invasion as if it were real-time breaking news, thousands of people panicked. Why? Because it felt immediate. There was no time to analyze, to pause, or to question. That's what urgency does. It hijacks your brain. It triggers loss aversion, the fear of losing something outweighing the desire to gain anything new. The moment you believe something might slip away, anxiety takes over, and judgment goes out the window. Marketers exploit this constantly. Limited time offer. Only a few left. Sale ends soon. These phrases aren't just informational, they're psychological weapons. Suddenly buying isn't a decision. It's a race, and the minute you feel rushed, you've already lost control, but it gets darker. Cults, scammers, and manipulators use urgency to force commitment before critical thinking kicks in. Pyramid schemes will push you to invest immediately. Act now or miss your chance to be rich. The urgency bypasses logic. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already too deep to walk away. Even politicians and media use it. Breaking news, emergency alerts, crisis headlines. Because when fear surges, people stop verifying. That's when misinformation spreads fastest. It's how wars start, how stock markets crash, how riots ignite. Almost always, it begins with a manufactured sense of urgency. The truth is, when your emotions are in the driver's seat, your rational mind shuts off. That's when you're most easily led. And that's the most disturbing part. Urgency feels natural. It feels like you're making the right decision, but in reality, someone else has already made it for you. So next time you see a flashing timer, an urgent warning, or someone pressuring you to act right now, pause. Because the moment you feel rushed is the moment you've already surrendered control. Number 22, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, frequency illusion. Ever learn a new word or concept and then suddenly it's everywhere? You hear a strange phrase for the first time, and now it's in every conversation. You spot a rare car once, and suddenly it's parked on every corner. It's not a glitch in the matrix. It's not a cosmic coincidence. It's your own brain playing tricks on you. It's called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as frequency illusion. Here's how it works. Once your brain locks onto a new idea, it subconsciously starts scanning the world for it. The information was always there, but now your mind is tuned to spot it. And suddenly, reality itself feels like it's shifting. Here's where it gets dangerous. This little glitch in your perception can be weaponized to change what you believe, how you think, and what you think you're noticing. Let's say someone wants you to adopt a certain idea. They don't force it. They plant it subtly. A tweet, a podcast, a random comment. At first, it feels like coincidence, but then it starts showing up more. Headlines, social feeds, conversations. It feels like the idea is gaining traction. But in truth, it's just your brain being hacked. Marketers love this. A brand ensures its name accidentally crosses your path. multiple times a day. Soon, you assume it must be popular, desirable. Real politicians and propagandists use the same strategy. They repeat a phrase, a message, an ideology, and eventually, it feels like everyone believes it. But the truth is, they just made sure you saw it, over and over. Cults, they drop ideas like seeds, then water them slowly until your brain starts filtering the world around those ideas. And then, those beliefs feel like your own. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon distorts your sense of reality. And the worst part? It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like you discovered the pattern, like the world is confirming what you already suspect. That's what makes it so dangerous. So the next time something starts appearing everywhere, pause. Ask yourself, is this truly happening, or is someone carefully making sure I see it? Number 23, subliminal messaging. You think you control your thoughts, your beliefs, your decisions, but what if right now, even as you listen, there are messages being planted in your mind? Messages you're not consciously aware of, but that still shape what you choose. This isn't science fiction. Subliminal messaging is real, it's powerful, and it's been used for decades to manipulate people, without their knowledge. The most infamous case? The 1957 Coca-Cola experiment. A researcher claimed he flashed the words, "Drink Coca-Cola and eat popcorn," on a movie screen for a split second. Too fast to notice, but enough for the subconscious to absorb. He said concession sales skyrocketed. Later, he admitted he faked the results, but the world panicked, and for good reason. Because the concept wasn't a lie, advertisers, politicians, intelligence agencies, they've all explored subliminal techniques because they work. At its core, subliminal messaging is about bypassing the conscious mind. Your critical thinking, your mental defenses, it targets the subconscious, which absorbs everything, without filter, without resistance. Here's how it's used. Hidden imagery in ads, subtle shapes, phrases, or symbols that trigger emotion. Color psychology and background music in political campaigns, designed to sway emotion without facts. Social media algorithms that quietly reinforce what they want you to see until you believe it's your own opinion. And it goes deeper. Auditory subliminals, barely perceptible sounds in music or ads, can spark unease or excitement. High-pitched tones can cause urgency. Low frequencies can induce discomfort. Ever felt strangely compelled to shop longer in a store? That may be engineered background music keeping you browsing and buying. Then there's priming. You hear or see something subtle, a color, a phrase, a scent. You don't notice it. But later, when you're faced with a decision, your brain leans toward a specific outcome without you knowing why. Casinos are built on priming, flashing lights, ringing bells, no clocks, no windows. All designed to make you lose track of time and keep spending. The darkest part? Subliminal messaging has become normal. Routine. Invisible.news networks use loaded language to guide how you feel about a story. Social media reinforces your biases until you live in a filtered reality. Even personal relationships can be shaped by subtle reinforcement. Gaslighting through repetition. So here's the real question. How much of your thinking is truly your own? How many of your beliefs, preferences, fears, even values were gently planted into your subconscious? The terrifying truth? You may never know. Number 24, the foot and mouth effect. Most people believe that being polite, warm, and friendly always works in their favor. But what if I told you that even something as innocent as making small talk or simply asking someone how they're doing could actually make you more vulnerable to manipulation? This is the foot and mouth effect, a psychological trick that plays on your very need to be seen as kind, agreeable, and emotionally present. And once someone knows how to use this against you, they can begin shaping your decisions without you even realizing it. One of the most well-documented examples of this effect comes from a study by social psychologists Howard and Gengler. They found that when people were first asked a simple, seemingly harmless question, something like, "How are you feeling today?" they became significantly more likely to comply with a later request, even if that request had nothing to do with the original conversation. Why? Because the moment you verbalize something about yourself, especially something positive, your subconscious kicks in. You feel a subtle pressure to remain consistent with what you just said. If you tell someone, "I'm having a good day," it actually becomes harder to say no, to a favor they ask right after. Denying them would contradict the positive tone you've already set. This tactic is everywhere, in sales, negotiations, and even police interrogations. A skilled salesperson won't launch into a pitch right away. Instead, they'll start with light conversation, maybe ask about your day, or make a small observation about something personal. And the moment you respond with something like, "I'm doing well, thanks for asking," you've unknowingly stepped into a psychological trap. You've projected warmth, you've opened the door to connection, and now you feel the need to stay consistent with that friendly, cooperative version of yourself. So when they ask you to take a quick look at a product or consider an option you didn't even want, you're far more likely to go along with it. In high-stakes settings like interrogations, this trick becomes even more dangerous. An interrogator might begin with casual, non-threatening questions. The goal? Get the suspect to respond in a calm, cooperative tone, and once that tone is set, the person unconsciously wants to maintain it. It becomes harder to resist, easier to give in. It's a psychological doorway. Once you step through, it's very hard to back out without feeling like you're contradicting yourself. So why does this happen? It comes down to one of the deepest psychological drives we have, the desire for internal consistency. Once we say something out loud, especially in front of someone else, we feel an instinctive pull to match our actions to our words. Social norms reinforce it. None of us want to come off as rude, dishonest, or contradictory. If you say, "I love helping people," and then someone asks you for help, saying no feels wrong, even if helping them was never your plan in the first place. This tactic doesn't just work on individuals, it can be used to manipulate the masses. Political campaigns and propaganda often start with broad, feel-good statements like, "We all want a better future." Once the public agrees, they're subtly led towards specific policies. Policies they might not have agreed with at all, had it not been for that initial emotional hook. So how do you protect yourself? Start by noticing when a conversation feels unusually warm or overly friendly, especially if it's followed by a request. That's your red flag. Take a mental step back. Just because you responded with politeness or positivity doesn't mean you owe anything in return. Learn to separate the friendly tone from the manipulation. Because in the end, the foot and mouth effect thrives on something as simple as speaking. Your own words become tools of persuasion, used to trap you into decisions you never meant to make. Number 25, the power of playing dumb. There's a saying, never underestimate the power of a fool. But what if the fool isn't really a fool at all? What if playing dumb is a carefully crafted manipulation tool, a way to control situations, lower people's defenses, and gain the upper hand without them ever realizing it? The power of playing dumb is one of the most underestimated psychological tricks. Yet it's been used for centuries by politicians, by criminals, and by everyday manipulators who know exactly how to stay one step ahead. One of the most well-known examples of this trick in action is the legendary detective Columbo. He was famous for his disheveled appearance, his slow, rambling speech, and his almost clueless demeanor. Every suspect underestimated him, dismissing him as a bumbling officer, until he caught them in their own contradictions. That's the essence of this tactic. When you appear less competent or less intelligent, people reveal more than they intend to. They drop their guard, they assume they're the one in control. But how exactly does this work? First, playing dumb gives the illusion of harmlessness. If someone appears clueless, they don't seem like a threat. People are naturally inclined to take charge when they perceive someone else as struggling, and that puts the dumb person in a position to be underestimated. This is especially effective in negotiations, in social interactions, and even in legal situations. By pretending to be oblivious, the manipulator gathers information without suspicion. They let others over-explain, fill in the details, and unknowingly expose their weaknesses. Then there's the art of selective incompetence, pretending not to know how to do something so that others step in and take responsibility. Employees use this trick all the time to avoid extra work. A person who doesn't know how to set up a presentation, cook a meal, or fix a computer might be perfectly capable. But by feigning ignorance, they push the responsibility onto someone else. It's a passive form of control, one that forces others to step in, do the work, and ultimately hand over power. This trick also thrives in social manipulation. Have you ever noticed how some people pretend to misunderstand or misinterpret a situation just to avoid accountability? By acting confused or unaware, they dodge blame. When caught in a lie, a manipulator might say, "Oh, I had no idea that's what you meant," or "I must have misunderstood." This forces the other person to second guess their own stance, making them appear unreasonable for holding the manipulator accountable. But the darkest side of this trick is its ability to exhaust and frustrate its target. Imagine trying to argue with someone who pretends they just don't understand your point, no matter how clearly you explain it. The more you try to clarify, the more they feign confusion. Eventually, you give up, frustrated, exhausted, and sometimes even doubting yourself. This is psychological warfare in its simplest form. It creates a mental loop where the victim becomes increasingly anxious, struggling to make sense of something that isn't actually rooted in confusion, but in deception. In politics, this tactic is often used to deflect responsibility. Leaders may feign ignorance about scandals or mistakes, claiming, "I was never informed," or "I don't recall that happening." It buys them time. It shifts blame. It creates uncertainty about the truth. And when done skillfully, it allows them to escape scrutiny, while their opponents waste energy trying to prove what should have been obvious. At its core, the power of playing dumb is about control. It exploits trust, lowers defenses, and manipulates people into revealing too much or taking on burdens they never should have accepted. It's a powerful reminder that not every fool is foolish. Sometimes the person pretending to be lost is the one leading you exactly where they want you to go. Number 26. Love bombing. At first, it feels like something out of a movie. The attention is intoxicating. The affection is overwhelming. You finally found someone who sees you, really sees you. They flood you with compliments. They send constant texts. They tell you you're special, that they've never met anyone like you. It's intense, exhilarating, almost too perfect. And that's because it is. This is love bombing, a psychological trick designed to make someone emotionally dependent before pulling the rug out from under them. It's not about genuine affection. It's a setup, a carefully crafted illusion. Love bombing works by hijacking the brain's reward system. When someone floods you with extreme positivity, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction. It's a high, an emotional rush that feels impossible to walk away from, and that's exactly the point. In relationships, it might look like extravagant gifts, rushing intimacy, or intense declarations of love after only a few days. In friendships or workplaces, it's an instant connection, relentless praise and flattery that feels almost surreal. But the real trick isn't in the excess, it's in the reversal, because once the victim is hooked, the withdrawal begins. The good morning texts stop, the warmth fades, the compliments turn into cold indifference, or worse, criticism. Suddenly, the person who made you feel like the most special person in the world pulls away. And you're left scrambling, trying to understand what went wrong. And this is where the real manipulation begins. Instead of recognizing the pattern, the victim blames themselves. They analyze every conversation. They lower their boundaries. They work harder to fix what they think they did wrong. They chase the affection, not realizing that the honeymoon phase was never real to begin with. This cycle, intense affection followed by sudden emotional starvation, is a psychological trap. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling so addictive. The victim never knows when the affection will return, so they keep chasing it, tolerating worse and worse treatment just for another hit of that early euphoria. It's a tactic used by narcissists in relationships, by cult leaders to keep followers obedient, even by toxic workplaces to manipulate employees into loyalty. The unpredictability creates an emotional roller coaster. The victim becomes so focused on regaining the high, they don't realize how much control they've lost. By the time they finally see the pattern, it's already too late. They're exhausted. They're isolated. They're doubting their own instincts. Number 27, the bandwagon effect manipulation. It starts with a simple thought. Everyone else is doing it, so it must be right. That's the bandwagon effect in action, one of the most underestimated yet powerful psychological tricks. It doesn't just influence your decisions, it exploits one of your deepest, most primal fears, the fear of being left out. It's the reason people jump on trends without questioning them. It's how misinformation spreads like wildfire. It's why we conform to ideas that we've never really stopped to think about. Take the Salem witch trials, for example. In the late 1600s, it all started with just a few accusations. But then it spiraled. People turned on their neighbors. Dozens of innocent people were executed, not because of evidence, but because everyone else seemed to believe it. And when the crowd moves in one direction, standing against it doesn't just feel hard, it feels impossible. At its core, the bandwagon effect is incredibly simple. When enough people adopt a belief or behavior, others follow. Not because they believe it's right, but because they fear being left behind. It's why we've seen things like the 2008 housing crisis. People watched real estate prices skyrocket, and they kept investing. Everyone else was doing it, so it must have been smart, right? Until the bubble popped and everything collapsed. It's how propaganda works too. A government doesn't need to convince everyone. Just enough. Just enough to create the illusion of agreement. Once that illusion of consensus takes hold, the rest follow, often blindly. And this is where things get dark, because the bandwagon effect isn't just a natural psychological quirk, it's actively weaponized. Marketers exploit it to drive sales. Ads don't just show products, they show you that everyone else is buying them. Join the millions who've already switched. Trending now. Don't miss out. The goal isn't to convince you logically, it's to make you afraid of being left out. Social media platforms take it even further. Algorithms amplify content that already has likes, comments, shares. Why? Because once you see that thousands of people like something, you're more likely to believe it, even if it's false. Politicians do it too. They'll fill rallies with paid supporters to create the illusion of mass approval. They don't have to win your mind. They just have to make you feel like you're already the minority if you don't agree. The worst part? This effect bypasses critical thinking. People stop asking questions. They stop evaluating if something is logical, moral, or even real. They just go along with it. And the more people follow, the harder it becomes to stand still, let alone go the other way. It snowballs into mass conformity, and once you're caught in it, you may not even realize it's happening. You think it was your choice all along. Number 28, reframing failure. Reframing failure sounds harmless, like a motivational technique. But when used manipulatively, it becomes one of the most dangerous psychological weapons out there. It doesn't just change how you see your mistakes, it changes how you see yourself. When someone reframes failure, they twist the meaning of your setback. Your mistake no longer becomes a moment of learning, it becomes proof. Proof that you're not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy. And once you start believing that, you stop trying. Imagine growing up in a home where every time you messed up, you weren't just corrected, you were shamed. You didn't just fail a test, you disappointed your parents. You didn't just forget a chore, you proved you were unreliable. It's subtle, but devastating. Because failure, when reframed the wrong way, doesn't stay in the past. It becomes part of your identity. And when you start to internalize that, the manipulation begins. Look at regimes like North Korea. There, failure isn't just personal, it's betrayal. Miss a work quota? You're not just inefficient, you're disloyal to the state. You're a threat to your family's future. The pressure to never fail becomes unbearable. And that's the point. When you tie someone's worth to perfection, you can control them through fear. But you don't have to live in a dictatorship to experience this. It happens in everyday life. At work, in relationships, in friendships. Ever had a boss who made every little mistake feel like a career-ending offense? That's not just being strict, that's reframing. And when it happens repeatedly, it crushes your confidence. You stop taking risks, you stop asking for help, you stay silent, not because you don't care, but because you're terrified that any misstep will be used against you. Manipulative partners do this too. They don't just point out your flaws, they weaponize them. You always do this. Maybe you're just not cut out for a relationship. These aren't observations, they're reframes. And over time, they make you believe that you're the problem, that you're lucky anyone puts up with you at all. And when you start to think that, you stay in the job, in the relationship, in the pain. Not because you want to, but because you've been manipulated into thinking you don't deserve better. The darkest part? Most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're just not trying hard enough, that they really are the failure someone else told them they were. But here's the truth. Failure is not personal. It is not permanent. And it's not defined by anyone else. If someone else controls what failure means to you, they control you. Number 29, gaslighting. What happens if someone keeps telling you that you're insane? At first you reject it, you know who you are, you trust your own mind, you remember what you saw. what you felt, what was said. But over time, something begins to shift. Maybe you are overreacting. Maybe you do get too emotional. Maybe your memory isn't as sharp as you thought it was. And slowly, piece by piece, your confidence starts to erode. This is gaslighting, a psychological weapon designed to make you question your own perception of reality. It's not just lying, it's the slow erasure of truth itself, replacing it with a more convenient version, one that benefits the manipulator. And the worst part? By the time you even begin to realize what's happening, if you ever do, you're already trapped. The term comes from a 1944 film, Gaslight, where a husband slowly manipulates his wife into thinking she's going insane. He dims the lights in their home, literally, and when she notices, he denies it. Over and over until she starts doubting her own senses, her own sanity. But this isn't just some movie plot. This happens in real life, in toxic relationships, in cults, in politics, in workplaces, even in families. It usually starts small. A manipulator denies things they said or did. I never said that. You're imagining things. You always twist my words. And even when you have evidence, even when you're sure, their certainty makes you question yourself. Then they go further. They don't just deny your memories, they attack your mind. You're so sensitive. You're always dramatic. You make problems out of nothing. It chips away at your identity. Your emotional responses are now labeled flaws, and soon you're apologizing for things you didn't do. You're second-guessing everything you think and feel. And when that confusion settles in, when you're no longer sure what's real, they become your compass. Then comes isolation. Gaslighters don't want outside voices disrupting their illusion, so they plant seeds of doubt. Your friends are jealous. Your family doesn't understand you. Bit by bit, they become the sole authority in your world. At that stage, they don't need to gaslight you anymore. You do it to yourself. You edit your own thoughts before they can form. You silence your own doubts. You accept their version of events, not because it makes sense, but because you no longer trust your own mind to disagree. That's what makes gaslighting so terrifying. It doesn't just alter your behavior, it rewrites your sense of self. You start to abandon yourself, and by the time you see the truth, if you ever do, you're not just fighting the manipulator. You're fighting the version of you they created. Number 30, guilt tripping. There's a way to control someone without raising your voice. Without threats, without force, you don't even need to argue. All you have to do is make them feel bad. This is guilt tripping, a silent psychological chokehold. It doesn't force you to obey. It makes you want to obey, or at least feel too ashamed not to. Think about it. How many times have you done something, not because you wanted to, but because you didn't want to feel like a bad person? Maybe you stayed in a relationship long past its expiration date. Maybe you took on a favor when you were already burnt out. Maybe you apologized for something that wasn't even your fault, just to keep the peace. That's guilt tripping, and it's terrifyingly effective. Here's how it works. Step 1, the manipulator plants the seed. They twist the situation just enough to make you feel responsible for their pain. A parent sighs, "After everything I've done for you?" A friend says, "I guess I don't matter anymore." A partner whispers, "I sacrificed so much for this and you're just going to walk away?" Notice, none of these statements demand anything outright. They don't have to. The guilt does all the work, but guilt isn't always enough. That's where shame comes in. Guilt says, you did something wrong. Shame says, you are wrong. It's not, you forgot my birthday. It's, you're a terrible friend. It's not, you made a mistake. It's, you're completely incompetent. And once someone believes that, they don't fight back. They don't just regret what they did. They feel like they are fundamentally broken, and that's where the control begins. Cult leaders, abusive partners, toxic bosses, they all use this tactic, not by screaming at people, but by convincing them they're never quite enough. When someone internalizes shame, they stop resisting. They start trying to earn approval that keeps moving just out of reach. And here's the darkest part. Eventually, you don't need a manipulator because you become your own. That voice, the one that says, I should say yes, I don't deserve better, I must be the problem. It's theirs. But now it sounds like yours, and once you start guilt-tripping yourself, the manipulation is complete. So how do you break it? Start by asking, are you doing this because you want to, or because you're afraid of being seen as selfish, ungrateful, or disappointing? Are you taking on blame that doesn't belong to you? Are you constantly chasing approval that never comes? If the answer is yes, pause. Reclaim that moment, because guilt only has power when you stop questioning it. And the moment you stop playing their game, the spell breaks. Number 31, the contrast principle. Imagine you walk into a store to buy a new suit. The salesperson greets you with a warm smile and immediately brings out the most expensive option in the store, a designer suit that costs well beyond your budget. You shake your head saying it's too much. But then they show you a second suit. Still pricey, but significantly cheaper than the first. And suddenly, this second suit feels like a bargain. You convince yourself it's a great deal. Without realizing it, you've just fallen for the contrast principle, a psychological trick that alters how we perceive value by comparing things side by side. It makes things seem better or worse depending on what they're contrasted with. See, our brains don't evaluate value in isolation. We understand worth by comparison. A $100 shirt feels absurdly expensive if you've just been looking at $20 shirts. But if you've just been shown a $500 jacket, that same $100 shirt suddenly feels reasonable. This mental shortcut happens so fast we don't even realize we're being influenced. And it's one of the most effective persuasion tactics out there. Salespeople, marketers, real estate agents, high-pressure negotiators, they all use it. Ever noticed how luxury car dealerships show you the most expensive models first? That's by design. After seeing a car that costs $100,000, a $60,000 car feels like a steal, even if it's still outrageously expensive. The contrast principle exploits your perception, not the actual value of what you're buying. But here's where it gets darker. This trick isn't just used in sales. It's used to manipulate behavior, to influence decisions, to shape how we judge people. Imagine a company introducing a terrible policy. Longer work hours, fewer benefits. Employees revolt, refusing to accept it. Then, management compromises, offering a slightly less awful policy. Suddenly, employees feel relieved and accept the new conditions, even though they're still much worse than before. The trick? The second option was always the intended goal. The first was just there to make it look better. This same technique plays out in politics and media too. Ever notice how controversial laws are first introduced in their most extreme form? Outrage follows. People demand change. Then a less extreme version is proposed, and the public breathes a sigh of relief. They accept it not because it's good, but because it looks better by contrast. And then there's how it shows up in human relationships. Someone who wants you to accept mistreatment might start by treating you terribly, cold, distant, critical. Then suddenly they give you something small, a compliment, a gift, a moment of attention. That tiny kindness feels huge compared to how they treated you before, and suddenly you feel grateful. Maybe even loyal. This is textbook emotional manipulation, and it's what keeps people stuck in toxic dynamics they would have rejected under normal circumstances. What makes the contrast principle so insidious is that it feels completely natural. Your brain truly believes the second option is better. It doesn't feel like manipulation. And once the effect takes hold, escaping it becomes nearly impossible, unless you know it's happening. So, how do you protect yourself? The key is awareness. Ask yourself, am I judging this based on its actual value? Or is something else shaping my perception? Because in the end, the real danger of the contrast principle isn't that people use it against you. It's that you might never even realize they did. Number 32, emotional blackmail. This psychological trick is so powerful, it can make people betray their own values, stay in toxic relationships, and feel completely trapped in their own lives. It's not hypnosis, it's not mind control. It's something worse. And the scariest part, most people don't even realize it's happening to them. Picture this. A mother says to her child, "If you leave me and move away, I don't know how I'll survive." A partner says, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't question me." A friend says, "After everything I've done for you, you owe me." These aren't just guilt trips. They are calculated forms of control. This is emotional blackmail, a manipulation tactic where someone exploits your emotions, fear, guilt, and obligation to get what they want. They don't ask. They don't force. Instead, they make you feel like denying them is cruel, selfish, even dangerous. And before you know it, You're doing things you never wanted to do because saying no feels impossible. And this isn't just something individuals use. Entire organizations, entire movements have been built on emotional blackmail. Take organized crime. The mafia doesn't just rely on violence. They manipulate loyalty, family ties, and unspoken debts. A small favor is granted, a gesture of kindness. But there's an unspoken rule. Refusing to reciprocate is betrayal. Walking away doesn't just feel dangerous, it feels morally wrong. That's how deep emotional blackmail can go. But it's not just crime syndicates. This trick is everywhere. In relationships, where one partner threatens to leave or fall apart unless they get their way. In families, where someone controls everyone through outbursts or silent treatment. At work, where employees are made to feel guilty for setting boundaries. And it always follows the same pattern. First, the manipulator makes a demand, subtle or direct. They want something from you. But instead of asking, they set a trap. Next, they trigger guilt, fear, or obligation. Maybe they act hurt, maybe they explode in anger, maybe they pull away emotionally. And finally, they offer you a way out. If you just do what I say, everything will be fine. And just like that, you're trapped, not because you can't say no, but because saying no feels like it will destroy everything. So how do you break free? It starts with recognition. If someone makes you feel like your emotions are being used against you, step back. If setting a boundary results in threats, guilt tripping, or emotional punishment, you're being manipulated. And the key to breaking free isn't to argue, or to justify, or to explain. It's to refuse to play the game. Because here's the truth. Emotional blackmailers don't want love. They don't want fairness. They don't want respect. They want control. And the moment they realize they can't control you anymore, they either escalate their tactics or move on to their next victim. Number 33, brainwashing. In today's world, you see people so brainwashed, they seem disconnected from reality. They believe the unbelievable, they defend the indefensible, they reject even the most obvious truths. But how do people get to this point? What exactly is brainwashing and how does it happen? Brainwashing isn't just an idea from dystopian fiction, it's real, it's effective. And the terrifying part? No one is truly immune. One of the most chilling real-world examples? The Jonestown Massacre. In 1978, over 900 people, including children, died after drinking cyanide-laced punch on the orders of cult leader Jim Jones. These weren't mindless followers. These were ordinary people who had been conditioned, step by step, until their critical thinking was completely overridden. They truly believed they were making their own choice. That's the power of brainwashing. It doesn't force you to change, it makes you want to. So, how does it work? It follows a pattern. Isolation, destabilization. Indoctrination, reinforcement. First, isolation. When you control the information someone has access to, you control their perception of reality. Jim Jones moved his followers to a remote compound in Guyana, cutting them off from outside influence. In everyday life, this happens through media bubbles, extremist groups, and even toxic relationships where only one perspective is allowed. The more someone's worldview is shaped by a single source, the less they question it. Next, destabilization. Break down mental defenses. Create fear, confusion, exhaustion. Cults use endless sermons, emotional breakdowns, and erratic punishments. Governments use nonstop crisis narratives, making people feel too overwhelmed to think for themselves. The more mentally drained someone becomes, the more they rely on the manipulator to make sense of things. Then comes indoctrination. Here's where new beliefs are implanted. If you conform, you're praised. If you question, you're punished. In cults, doubting the leader means exile. In real life, questioning the wrong ideology can get you canceled, shunned, or socially ostracized. Over time, this rewires the brain, and finally, reinforcement. Once brainwashing is complete, the new identity is constantly reinforced through rituals, slogans, echo chambers, and identity loyalty. At this point, people stop questioning not because they've been silenced, but because their beliefs are now tied to their identity. They don't feel brainwashed, they feel enlightened, and that's the scariest part. Brainwashing doesn't feel like brainwashing when it's happening to you, it feels like truth. So how do you protect yourself? Step 1, awareness. Brainwashing works by making critical thinking feel unnecessary, or even dangerous. The moment you feel pressured not to question something, that's a red flag. Step 2, diverse perspectives. If you're only hearing one side, you are being controlled, even if you don't realize it. Step 3. Watch your emotions: fear, guilt, outrage. These are the tools used to override logic. If your emotions are being used to control your beliefs, stop and ask, who benefits from me thinking this way? Because once your mind has been rewritten, you won't even realize it happened. Number 34. Playing on insecurities. Everyone has insecurities, those small whispers of doubt that creep into the back of your mind. Am I good enough? Do they really like me? What if I fail? Now imagine someone knowing exactly what those insecurities are and using them to control you. This is one of the darkest psychological tricks, weaponizing insecurities to manipulate behavior. And it happens everywhere: relationships, workplaces, politics, even in the ads you scroll past daily. Take Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, for example. He didn't just steal billions. He exploited his victims' deepest fears. He preyed on wealthy investors terrified of missing out, made them feel special, chosen like part of an exclusive club. Once he had them hooked, he used their greed, their self-doubt, and their need for status against them. The result? People kept handing him money, ignoring the red flags waving right in front of them. That's how this manipulation works. It starts by identifying your deepest fears or desires, and then twisting them. A romantic partner might subtly make you feel unattractive, so you seek their approval. A boss might imply you're replaceable, pushing you to overwork just to keep your spot. A so-called friend might remind you of your failures to keep you in check. The goal? Make you dependent on their reassurance, their validation, their protection. And it's incredibly effective, because insecurities cloud judgment. When someone makes you feel like you're not enough, you begin to second-guess yourself. You start working harder, proving yourself, even if it costs you your dignity. And they control the supply of validation. They give it, take it away, make you chase it. You're stuck in a loop of trying to earn something they've conditioned you to need. Social media is a breeding ground for this. Algorithms thrive on insecurity. They show you ads that make you feel unattractive, unsuccessful, like you're behind in life. Influencers flaunt curated lives that make yours feel dull. Companies sell you solutions to problems you never had, until they told you you did. But this isn't just about business. It happens in families too. A toxic parent constantly reminding their child they'd be nothing without them. A jealous friend who downplays your wins so you never feel truly proud. A partner who chips away at your confidence until you feel lucky just to be with them. Over time, these tactics break you down. They make you easier to control. So how do you fight back? First, recognize the pattern. If someone's words consistently make you feel small, insecure, or unsure of your worth, ask yourself, are they building you up or making you rely on their validation? Second, rebuild your confidence outside of their influence. The less power someone has over your self-worth, the harder it is for them to manipulate you. And finally, remember this: no one who truly cares about you will ever use your insecurities against you. Because the most dangerous thing about this manipulation isn't just that people fall for it. It's that they often don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. Number 35, cultivating dependence. There's a reason cult leaders, abusive partners, and authoritarian regimes rarely rely on physical chains. They don't have to, because the most effective way to control someone isn't by locking them up. It's by making them believe they can't survive without you. This is the dark art of engineered dependence, a psychological trick designed to make people willingly surrender their independence. Not through force, not through threats, but through emotional manipulation so subtle you don't realize it's happening until it's too late. It all begins with removing options, quietly, strategically, one by one. A partner might insist that your friends don't really care about you. A group might warn that your family is toxic. You need to cut them off. A leader might whisper, "Only we know the truth. The outside world is dangerous." At first, these seem like concerns, maybe even loving guidance. But soon they turn into rules, and then into beliefs. Until one day, you look around, and you're alone. No one left to turn to, no one but them, and that's exactly where they want you. Because once isolation is complete, dependence takes over. They become your only source of validation. The only one you trust, the only one who can help. They create problems only they can solve. They withhold affection until obedience is guaranteed. They control the finances, the decisions, even your movements. Eventually, the victim stops making choices. not because they don't want to, but because they've been conditioned to believe they can't. And here's the cruelest part. The victim thinks it's their idea. They aren't physically restrained. They're not locked in a room, but they stay. Because their reality has been rewritten so completely. That leaving feels like stepping off a cliff. This tactic isn't new. It's been used for centuries. Cults isolate members from their families, turning the leader into the only voice of truth. Abusive partners erode confidence until the victim believes they're nothing without them. Totalitarian regimes censor information so thoroughly that citizens feel powerless without the very system controlling them. And once someone has been broken down like this, they don't need to be forced to stay. They'll choose to, even when escape is possible, even when the doors are wide open. They hesitate. Because when your entire identity has been shaped by someone else's control, freedom doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like danger. It feels like loss. And that's what makes cultivating dependence one of the most sinister psychological tactics ever used. Number 36, triangulation jealousy induction. There's a psychological trick so subtle, it can quietly unravel your confidence without you even realizing it's happening. It's called triangulation. At first it seems harmless, a passing comment, a little comparison. But over time, it turns the most self-assured person into an anxious wreck. Triangulation works by introducing a third person, real or imagined, into your relationship dynamic. The goal? To create tension, competition, insecurity. Imagine this. A controlling partner casually mentions how attractive someone else is. They compare you to their ex, implying you're falling short, or they hint, just enough, that someone else is showing them attention. Nothing direct, nothing confrontational, just little seeds of doubt dropped carefully, methodically. And suddenly you're second-guessing yourself, competing for their approval, trying harder, giving more, just to feel secure again. That's triangulation, but it doesn't stop there. The next stage is jealousy induction. Now, it's not just passive comments, it's deliberate actions. They flirt in front of you, they praise someone else right in your presence, they make sure you see the likes, the comments, the text messages. And every time you try to bring it up, they downplay it. You're being paranoid. You're too sensitive. But here's the truth, it's not about the third person. It's about control, because the more unstable you feel, the more desperate you become for reassurance. You stop asking, is this relationship good for me? And start asking, what can I do to be good enough? This tactic doesn't just show up in romantic relationships, it appears everywhere. In workplaces, where toxic bosses pit employees against each other, favoring one just enough to keep everyone else on edge. In families, where a parent constantly compares their children, creating rivalry instead of connection. Even in politics, where leaders divide their followers into factions, making them compete for attention, resources, or righteousness. Why does it work? Because humans are wired for social validation. When someone you care about, someone you admire, suddenly introduces competition, your brain goes into survival mode. You crave their approval, you fight for their attention, and that fight is exactly what the manipulator wants. They've got you focused on them, not yourself, not your worth, not your needs. So how do you stop it? First, recognize the pattern. If someone is constantly making you feel like you're in a competition, step back and ask, who's really benefiting here? Second, refuse to play the game. When you stop reacting to the bait, the comparisons, the jealousy plays, they lose power. And finally, rebuild your sense of worth. Because the stronger your self-esteem, the harder it is for someone to shake it with a third party. In the end, triangulation is a game of psychological warfare. It's designed to make you chase, prove, and submit. But the moment you stop chasing, the game is over. Number 37, authority, bias, the hidden power behind obedience. In 1961, a chilling experiment took place that exposed something deeply unsettling about human nature. Psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to know, how far would ordinary people go when simply told to by someone in charge? Participants were brought into a lab and told they were part of a learning study. Their task? Administer an electric shock to a stranger every time that stranger got an answer wrong. With each mistake, the shocks increased in intensity, starting with mild discomfort and ending in levels marked as dangerous. Now, the person being shocked wasn't real. It was an actor, faking screams, pleas, even silence. But the participants didn't know that. They looked uneasy. Some hesitated, But most kept going, kept pressing that button, just because a man in a white lab coat told them to. 2/3 of them went all the way to the highest voltage. They believed they were inflicting life-threatening pain, but they did it anyway. Why? Because of authority bias, our instinctive tendency to obey those we perceive as powerful, knowledgeable, or in control. It's the same psychological shortcut that makes us follow doctors' orders without question. Believe what a newscaster says just because they're behind a desk, or go along with workplace policies even when they make zero sense. In our minds, authority equals truth, and that blind trust can be incredibly dangerous. Throughout history, corrupt governments have exploited it to justify atrocities. Corporations have used it to silence whistleblowers. Cult leaders have demanded and received absolute loyalty, even to the point of death. Authority bias works because the brain is wired for shortcuts. You see a uniform, a badge, a confident voice, you automatically assume they know better than you. And the more confident they sound, the harder it is to challenge them. That's why scams work so well when someone pretends to be a police officer or a government official. It's not logic that's triggering your response. It's subconscious obedience. And when fear is added to the mix, that bias becomes nearly unbreakable. If the person in power not only gives orders, but also threatens consequences, then resisting doesn't just feel wrong. It feels dangerous. People comply even when they know something's wrong simply because saying no feels like a risk. And here's the scariest part. You don't even need real authority to trigger this response. All it takes is the illusion of power, a confident tone, a title, a clipboard, even just acting like you're in charge. That's all it takes for most people to surrender their judgment, because the most effective manipulation doesn't force obedience. It makes you feel like you're doing the right thing by obeying. Number 38, mind control, the subtle theft of thought. What if I told you that your beliefs, your opinions, even your memories could be rewritten? Not through force, not through hypnosis, but through subtle, calculated influence you don't even notice. Sounds like science fiction, right? But it's real, and it happens more than you'd think. Take the infamous Stanford prison experiment. In 1971, 24 ordinary students were divided into two groups, guards and prisoners. No one was forced, no one was brainwashed, and yet within days, something disturbing happened. The students playing guards became cruel, authoritarian, even sadistic. They humiliated the prisoners, denied them sleep, basic rights, even food. And the prisoners, they broke emotionally, mentally. They accepted the abuse as if it were deserved, as if it were real. No one told them to behave that way. It happened through psychological erosion, the slow, invisible breakdown of identity. First, isolation. Remove people from their familiar world, and their reality starts to shrink. Their anchor disappears. Soon they'll believe almost anything. It's not just experiments or cults where this happens. Governments, corporations. Even toxic relationships use the same formula. Limit your perspective. Create fear. Repeat a message until it feels true. Repetition is a weapon. The human brain craves patterns. If we hear something enough times, it starts to feel right. That's why propaganda works. That's how misinformation spreads. That's how people end up defending beliefs that actively hurt them. Then comes fear, the most powerful tool of all. Make someone feel unsafe. Make the world feel out of control. Then offer certainty. Authoritarians create enemies. Cults predict doom. Manipulative partners isolate and destabilize. And you stop questioning. Because mind control isn't about forcing you to change. It's about making you want to. By the time you realize it's happened, if you ever do, it's already too late. Number 39, cultivating a false identity. When the liar becomes the lie. Some manipulators don't just tell lies. They become the lie. They shape their entire identity to fit what will earn your trust. They don't just deceive, they perform. Take Frank Abagnale, the real-life con artist behind Catch Me If You Can. Before he was 21, he successfully impersonated a pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer. He had no degrees, no training, just confidence, charm, and carefully chosen details. But people believed him. Why? Because he understood something dangerous. If you look the part, act like you belong. Speak with authority. People will fill in the blanks for you. They won't question. They'll assume. That's how manipulators work. They don't just trick you. They shape themselves into the person you want to trust. And once that illusion is built, others start reinforcing it. They vouch for the liar. Defend them. Ignore red flags. The fake identity becomes real, not just to others, but even to the manipulator themselves. The lie feeds itself. Over time, even they may no longer know what's real and what's been manufactured. Number 40. Social proof. The power of the crowd. In 1968, a woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment in New York. She screamed for help for 30 minutes. Dozens of people saw or heard it. No one helped. No one even called the police. Everyone assumed someone else would. This is the bystander effect, a dark consequence of social proof. Social proof is our instinct to follow the crowd. If lots of people believe something, do something, buy something, it must be right, right? It's why we line up outside busy restaurants, why we buy products with 5,000 plus five-star reviews, why trends explode overnight. But when social proof is manipulated, it becomes a weapon. Advertisers use it. Millions love our product. Scammers use it. Fake reviews, bots hyping up a cryptocurrency. Propaganda machines use it. Repeat a lie until it sounds like truth. Because once people see mass approval, even if it's fake, they start to believe it. And here's the chilling part. You don't need 1 million real followers. Just enough to create the illusion that everyone else believes. And when enough people buy in, even skeptics fall in line. We stop questioning. We follow the crowd, and all the while we believe the decision was ours. Number 41, obligation, the hidden chain. You didn't see coming. A friend buys you lunch. Later, they ask for a favor. You feel like you should say yes, even if it's inconvenient. That's reciprocity. It's natural. It holds society together. But when used deliberately, it's one of the most subtle forms of manipulation. In the 1970s, members of the Hare Krishna movement handed out flowers to strangers in airports. No strings attached, just a gift. Moments later, they'd ask for a donation, and most people gave them money. Not because they wanted to, but because they felt obligated. That's the power of unspoken debt. It doesn't force you. It makes you feel like saying no is wrong. In relationships, this plays out when a partner showers you with affection, then guilt trips you later for not appreciating all they've done. A friend who always pays the bill might later ask for something big, and you say yes, even if you don't want to. It turns generosity into a trap. Even companies use this. Free samples, gifts in the mail. Let us help you first. Then they ask for something in return. And we say yes, because saying no suddenly feels rude, ungrateful, wrong. But here's the truth. Not every favor needs to be repaid. Not every gift is truly free. The moment a kind gesture makes you feel trapped, ask yourself, was this really generosity or was it a transaction in disguise? Number 42, Stockholm Syndrome. When survival rewrites loyalty. There's a moment in every hostage situation when you'd expect the victim to be filled with fear, rage, a desperate drive to escape. But sometimes, something strange happens. Instead of hate, they feel loyalty. Instead of resisting, they begin to defend their captor. Sometimes, they even fall in love. Sounds impossible, right? But it's not. The term Stockholm Syndrome comes from a real event in 1973. A bank robbery in Sweden turned into a 6-day hostage crisis. 4 people were locked inside a vault, terrified, powerless. But when the police finally rescued them, something bizarre happened. The hostages defended their captors. One of them even raised money for the robber's legal defense. And this wasn't an isolated case. It's been seen in kidnappings, cults, abusive relationships, even in prisoner of war camps. But Stockholm Syndrome isn't a sign of weakness. It's a survival mechanism. When someone is trapped and powerless, the brain stops trying to fight and starts trying to adapt. Their captor controls everything: food, movement, even the right to live, and so the brain rewires fear into something else: attachment. It often begins with small acts of mercy, a kidnapper allowing their hostage to eat, an abuser who says sorry after an outburst, a cult leader who offers protection from an imagined threat. Tiny gestures that start to look like compassion, suddenly the abuser becomes the savior. And when the same person causes your pain and relieves it, your mind clings to the relief. Then comes isolation. The victim is cut off from the outside world with no one to challenge the new reality. Soon they stop questioning and start justifying. That's why abuse victims often defend their abusers. That's why some hostages refuse to escape, even when given the chance. It's not logical. It's not rational, it's survival. And once dependency sets in, when the only way to stay safe is to keep your captor happy, you stop resisting altogether. You might even start working for them. That's the terror of Stockholm syndrome. The mind will betray itself to survive. And by the time the victim realizes what's happened, if they ever do, it's already too late. Number 43. Learned helplessness. When freedom stops feeling possible. In 1974, the world was stunned by the case of Patty Hearst. She was a wealthy heiress, kidnapped by a militant group called the Symbionese Liberation Army. At first, she resisted. She was beaten, locked in a dark closet, isolated for weeks. But months later, there she was, robbing a bank alongside her captors armed with a gun. How does that happen? How does a victim turn into a willing participant? It's not just manipulation. It's psychological breakdown. This is learned helplessness. When someone is trapped in a situation where every effort to resist fails, the brain adapts in a disturbing way. It stops trying altogether. This was first discovered in an experiment with dogs. They were placed in cages with electric floors. At first, the dogs tried to escape, but after being shocked repeatedly with no way out, they gave up. And here's what's terrifying. Even when the cage door was opened, they still didn't leave. They had learned that nothing they did would matter. This is what happens to victims of abuse, manipulation, and coercion. They stay even when there's a way out. Why? Because by then, their brain doesn't believe escape is possible. It starts with unpredictable reward and punishment. One day the captor is kind. The next, they're cruel. The victim's brain becomes exhausted, too focused on surviving to think clearly. Then comes self-doubt. Manipulators chip away at confidence, repeating, "You're weak. You can't survive without me. You're lucky I put up with you." Eventually, the victim starts to believe it. Add isolation, where outside voices disappear, and the captor becomes the only reality. Then finally, forced dependence. The victim relies on their abuser for food, shelter, emotional connection, everything. By this point, they don't just accept the abuse, they might defend it, just like Patty Hearst. They're not just victims anymore, they're participants. This is why people stay in toxic relationships, why cult members remain loyal, why prisoners of war bond with their captors. It's not stupidity, it's not weakness. It's the brain trying to survive. And the scariest part? Once someone believes freedom isn't possible, they stop looking for it. Number 44, fear-mongering, turning anxiety into control. Fear is the oldest and most powerful tool of control. It overrides logic, crushes independent thought, and turns people into willing followers. Because when people are afraid, they don't analyze, they don't question. They just want to feel safe. And that's what makes fear-mongering one of the most dangerous psychological weapons ever used. History is full of examples. Take the Salem witch trials in the 1600s. Fear swept through the town like wildfire. People believed witches were hiding in plain sight. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Innocent people confessed to crimes they never committed just to avoid death. Logic vanished. Fear took over. And it still happens today. A manipulative boss keeps their employees terrified of losing their jobs. So no one complains. An abusive partner convinces someone the world outside is dangerous. So they never leave. Even politicians and media outlets do it. They use fear to keep people anxious. Then present themselves as the only solution, because fear hijacks the brain. When you're anxious, your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes threats, goes into overdrive. Logical thinking, gone. You're in survival mode. And in that moment, whoever offers you safety becomes your savior. That's why fear-based marketing is so effective. It doesn't sell a product, it sells protection. Without this insurance, you'll be ruined. Without this cream, you'll age faster. Without this belief system, you're not safe. And the worst part? Fear-driven manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like preparation. It feels like someone's looking out for you. But if someone is constantly keeping you afraid and offering themselves as the only way out, ask yourself why. Because the moment fear becomes a leash, someone else is holding the other end. Number 45, memory manipulation, rewriting the past to control the future. What if I told you some of your memories, moments you swear happened, might be completely false? What if someone could plant a memory in your mind? and you'd believe it as strongly as your real ones. It sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it's real. And it's one of the most terrifying tools of manipulation. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved this with the Lost in the Mall experiment. Participants were told stories from their childhood, some true, some completely fake. One was simple. You were lost in a shopping mall when you were young. At first, they denied it. But after repeated suggestion and questioning, many remembered it. They described how it felt. Who found them? What the mall looked like. A memory that never happened, but felt 100% real. That's because memory isn't a recording. It's a reconstruction. Every time you recall something, your brain pieces it together. And sometimes changes it. The more you remember an event, the less accurate it becomes. And with the right influence, someone can actually reshape your memories. Change how you feel about them, even make you doubt what's real. It starts with suggestion. Are you sure that's what happened? I remember it differently. That small seed of doubt grows. Your brain wants to stay consistent, so it adjusts the story. Then comes reinforcement. If others confirm the false memory, even accidentally, you believe it more. Because the brain prioritizes group consensus over personal doubt. This is how false confessions happen, how cult leaders rewrite personal histories, how abusers convince victims that they're the problem. It's not just forgetting. It's a rewriting of identity, and that's what makes memory manipulation so dangerous. Because if someone can change your past, they can control your future, and by the time you realize your memories aren't yours anymore, the damage is already done. Number 46. Public shaming, the oldest form of social control. For centuries, public shaming has been one of the most effective tools of control. It strips away dignity, it isolates, it turns a person into a cautionary tale. From medieval villagers jeering at criminals in the stocks, to digital mobs destroying reputations in a matter of hours, the psychology behind it hasn't changed, because public shaming isn't just about punishment. It's about breaking someone down so completely that they begin to accept their own destruction. One of the most infamous examples, the Salem witch trials. In 1692, innocent people, mostly women, were dragged into the public eye. Accused of witchcraft, forced to confess under unbearable pressure. There was no real evidence, only fear, hysteria, and the brutal power of collective condemnation. Once someone became a target, their fate was sealed, because when a crowd forms, reason disappears. But why does public humiliation work so well? It taps into one of our oldest primal fears, social rejection. Humans are wired for connection. We survive in groups. To be cast out isn't just emotionally painful, it's biologically terrifying. In ancient times, exile from the tribe meant death. And while the modern world may not physically exile us anymore, public humiliation triggers the same primal panic, the fear of being utterly alone, despised, powerless. And it doesn't just happen in viral scandals. It happens at work, when a boss ridicules an employee in front of others. In school, when a student is mocked for a mistake. In relationships, when one partner humiliates the other to assert control. It's a power move, a psychological strategy designed to make the victim feel small, weak, and dependent. And here's where the trap gets even darker. After being humiliated, most victims don't fight back. They try to earn back approval from the same people who shamed them. And that makes them even easier to control. Now, social media has taken public shaming to an entirely new level. One poorly worded comment, one misunderstood joke, and suddenly thousands, maybe millions, become judge, jury, and executioner. The larger the crowd, the less individual responsibility anyone feels. It becomes a feeding frenzy of outrage. And once someone is branded as bad, the internet rarely forgives. But here's the thing. Public shaming isn't just about punishing one person. It's about controlling everyone else. It's a warning. Step out of line. And this could be you. It enforces social norms. Not because those norms are always right, but because the fear of shame is stronger than the will to resist. So how do you protect yourself? You recognize what shame is trying to do. Control you through fear. The moment you see that, its grip weakens. Stand your ground. Refuse to absorb guilt that doesn't belong to you. Reject the narrative that you deserve to be humiliated. Because the true trick of public shaming is this. It only works if you believe you deserve it. And the moment you stop believing that, the entire illusion shatters. Number 47. Scapegoating, turning fear into a weapon. History doesn't repeat itself because people forget. It repeats because manipulation works. And one of the oldest, most dangerous psychological weapons in history is scapegoating. It's the act of blaming a person or a group for problems they never caused. It's simple. It's effective and it's everywhere. The Salem witch trials, a perfect case. Paranoia swept through the Massachusetts Bay Colony. People were scared of strange illnesses, crop failures, rising tensions. But instead of facing a complex, uncomfortable reality, they latched onto a simple lie, witchcraft. And once someone was accused, their fate was sealed. Neighbors turned on neighbors, executions followed, and the real problems, they were never solved. Because scapegoating doesn't solve problems, it distracts from them. So why does it work? Because the human brain craves simple answers, especially during chaos. We want to believe that our suffering has a source. A villain, a face, it makes us feel like we've regained control. Blame brings relief. Even if that relief is built on a lie and scapegoating isn't just some relic of the past, it happens every day. A cheating partner accuses their spouse of being paranoid. A corrupt politician blames the media. A failing CEO points fingers at lazy employees. It's all the same trick. Redirect attention. Protect yourself. Let someone else burn. And the more this tactic is used, the more distorted reality becomes. The scapegoat becomes the focus. The real problems stay buried. And the scariest part? People get so invested in their chosen villain, they reject any evidence that challenges their version of the truth. That's how entire communities get persecuted. Not because of what they've done, but because someone needed a villain. So how do you fight back? You ask the right questions. Who benefits from this blame? What truths are being hidden while the scapegoat is dragged into the spotlight? Are you accepting a convenient lie over a complex truth? Because the most powerful form of control isn't force. It's fear. And when that fear is given a name, a face, a scapegoat, it becomes the perfect weapon. Number 48, the seeds of self-doubt, breaking confidence from within. You don't need chains to keep someone trapped. Sometimes all it takes is a whisper. The most dangerous form of control doesn't look like force. It looks like a question. What if I'm not good enough? This is the art of sowing self-doubt. A quiet, insidious form of manipulation that destroys from the inside out. It breaks confidence, redefines reality, and locks people in a mental prison of their own making. And once the seed is planted, most people water it themselves. Take the infamous Milgram experiment. While it's remembered for obedience to authority, something more subtle happened underneath. The participants didn't just follow orders, they began to doubt their own moral instincts. They were told to keep going. It's okay. You must continue. And slowly their resistance faded. They stopped trusting their gut, and they started trusting the voice in the lab coat. That's how self-doubt works. Not as a crash, but as a slow collapse. It often begins with small comments. Are you sure that's the right decision? You always do this? That doesn't sound like you. Repeated enough, those comments become internalized. The brain starts to look for proof that the doubt is justified. And once that belief takes root, confidence falls like a house of cards. Skilled manipulators use this tactic to gain control without ever raising their voice. If they can make you question yourself enough, you'll start looking to them for validation. You'll hand over your judgment in exchange for reassurance. That's how toxic relationships work. That's how cults control members. That's how abuse becomes invisible. And here's the scariest part. Even if the manipulator disappears, that voice they planted, it stays. The doubt keeps whispering. Maybe they were right about me. That's why self-doubt is so dangerous. It doesn't just control people. It makes them control themselves. Number 49, exploiting empathy. When compassion becomes a cage. Empathy is supposed to be a strength. It's how we connect, how we build trust, how we care. But in the wrong hands, empathy becomes a weapon. The most dangerous manipulators don't use force. They use guilt. They use neediness. They use compassion, and they make you feel like you're choosing to stay. A disturbing example? Munchausen syndrome by proxy. A caregiver, often a parent, induces or fabricates illness in a child. The child suffers real pain, becomes totally dependent, and never questions the person hurting them. Because they believe they're being helped. Meanwhile, the abuser gets attention. Sympathy control. This is manipulation by compassion. The trick? make you feel responsible for someone else's pain. Then present yourself as the only one who can fix it. It starts with lines like, "You're the only one who understands me. If you leave, I don't know what I'll do." The goal is to make you feel irreplaceable, while slowly eroding your freedom. If you resist, they escalate. They increase emotional demands. They drain your energy. Until giving in becomes easier than fighting back. You'll see it in cults. You'll see it in manipulative partners. You'll see it in scam messages begging for help, playing on your heart. And the cruel irony? The more empathetic you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Because when your compassion becomes an obligation, you stop seeing the trap and you start justifying the chains. Number 50, micromanipulation, the control you never see coming. Imagine this. You're in a conversation. Everything feels normal. Nothing seems off. But after a few minutes, something shifts. You begin to second-guess your choices. You feel oddly guilty about things you never questioned before. You didn't get yelled at. There were no direct demands, and yet somehow you feel off balance, like your thoughts have been nudged without your awareness. That is micromanipulation. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it's subtle, almost imperceptible. Micromanipulation is the quiet art of controlling someone's decisions, beliefs, and behavior, without them realizing it's happening. Unlike obvious coercion or lies, micromanipulation works like slow poison. Drip by drip, tiny emotional adjustments that gently push you exactly where someone else wants you to go. Take the classic foot in the door technique. It starts small. Let's say a company asks you to sign a harmless petition, something you already support. No pressure, you agree. Then a few days later, they come back and ask for a donation. And because you already said yes once, your brain leans toward consistency. You don't even notice it. But that first agreement conditioned you to say yes again. It was a setup, a psychological priming, and you walked right into it. But micromanipulation goes far beyond sales tricks. In toxic relationships, it's an art form. Think about a partner who never explicitly demands anything. But they sigh at just the right moment. They raise an eyebrow when you bring up plans. They pause before responding. And that pause says more than words ever could. They never say, "Don't do that," but you feel it anyway. And slowly, without being told, you start changing. You adjust your behavior just to avoid that disapproval, even though they never directly asked you to. That's micromanipulation. It can happen in workplaces too. Ever had a boss casually mention how another employee stayed late to finish a project? They never tell you to stay longer, but you hear it, you feel it. And suddenly you're at your desk after hours, volunteering obedience you were never required to give. This is how micromanipulation works. Plant the idea without saying it out loud. Let the target come to the conclusion themselves. And because they think it was their idea, the control becomes invisible. This tactic plays out on a massive scale in media, marketing, and politics. Ever seen ads that say, "Only 5 left in stock"? Or, "This deal won't last"? That's urgency. Manufactured pressure. It pushes you to act, not because you truly need the product, but because you're being manipulated into thinking time is running out. You still feel like you're in control, but your decision was guided. And that's what makes micromanipulation so terrifying. It doesn't look like manipulation. It feels like your own reasoning, your own thoughts, your own choices. It operates through gestures. Phrasing, timing, tone, all carefully calibrated to steer you gently, subtly, in a direction you never chose for yourself. And here's the worst part. Once someone becomes skilled at micromanipulation, they can make you believe their ideas were yours all along. Number 51, exploiting the need for closure. Weaponizing uncertainty. Some questions never stop echoing. Why did they leave? What really happened? What was the truth? That gnawing feeling of unfinished business isn't just emotional discomfort. It's a psychological vulnerability. It's called the need for closure. And for those who understand it, it's one of the easiest ways to manipulate your mind. Here's the thing. The human brain hates loose ends. When something is unresolved, our minds obsess over it. We replay moments. We search for meaning. We fill in the blanks, even if it means believing in something false. That's where the manipulation begins. Take relationships. Ever heard of someone who becomes obsessed with their ex, not because they want them back, but because they never got a real explanation? That's not love. That's an open loop in the brain, a mental vacuum that screams for closure. And when the person who left finally returns, even with a weak or dishonest excuse, most people accept it, just to stop the psychological pain of not knowing. Manipulators know this. They disappear, they ghost, then they return just when you're desperate for clarity. And when they do, they don't have to tell the truth. They just have to offer any answer. Because when someone is desperate for resolution, even a lie will feel like relief. This trick scales up far beyond personal relationships. Look at cults. Cults trap followers by dangling half-revealed secrets. You're close to the truth, they say. You just need to prove yourself first. More obedience, more loyalty, more sacrifice, but the truth never comes. Because the truth isn't real. It's a tool, a dangling carrot that keeps followers chasing answers they'll never receive. Even in politics, this tactic is everywhere. A politician might say, "They're not telling you everything. The real story is out there. You just have to look harder." They don't give facts. They give ambiguity, and ambiguity fuels conspiracy. Because when people are forced to invent their own explanations, they believe those explanations even more strongly than the truth. Marketers do the same. Vague ads, cryptic teasers, cliffhanger endings. You keep thinking about the message long after it ends. You look for answers, you fill in the blanks, and eventually, you buy because your brain won't let the loop go until it's closed. But here's the danger. When people crave closure, they'll believe anything that gives them relief. That's why misinformation spreads. That's why scams work. That's why cult members cling to false teachings. Why propaganda is so effective? Because any answer feels better than no answer. Because any answer feels better than no answer. And the more desperate we are for closure, the easier we are to control, because in the end, whoever controls the answers controls the mind. Number 52, the foot in the door technique, the trap that starts small. Let's begin with a simple question. Would you be willing to put a small sticker on your window to support a cause you believe in? It seems harmless, just a sticker. But a few weeks later, the same organization asks you to put a massive sign in your front yard. Surprisingly, you're much more likely to say yes. Why? Because of one of the most insidious psychological tricks ever discovered, the foot in the door technique. It's terrifyingly effective because it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your own decision. One of the most chilling real-life examples? The Patty Hearst case. In 1974, Patty, an heiress to a powerful newspaper empire, was kidnapped by a militant group called the Symbionese Liberation Army. At first, she was terrified, but they didn't demand loyalty right away. They started small. First, they had her record a message condemning her own family. Then, they asked for minor cooperation. Then a little more. Eventually, she was robbing banks alongside them, believing fully in their cause. How does this work? It exploits something called consistency bias. We have a deep psychological need to stay consistent with our past behavior. So once we agree to something, even something tiny, our brains try to align future decisions with that first yes. It's why advertisers offer free trials. After a week or two, you feel committed. Even if you're not using the service anymore, canceling feels like going back on your own choice. It's why salespeople say, just take a test drive. Just talk numbers. Before you know it, you're signing a contract, trapped by the momentum of your own agreement. And in the darkest cases, this is how cults and extremist groups recruit. They don't ask for total loyalty up front. They ask for something small, a signature, a donation, one meeting. And once you've said yes, saying no becomes harder because you're already walking down the path they chose for you. So the next time someone asks you for something small, remember, it's not the request itself you should be worried about. It's what comes after it. Number 53, suggestive language and hypnosis. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone subtly led you to a decision, one you thought was entirely your own? Maybe you walked into a store and before you knew it, you were convinced to buy something you didn't even need. You probably thought it was your own choice. But what if it wasn't? What if a few carefully chosen words could bypass your critical thinking and plant a decision in your mind before you even realized it? That's the power of suggestive language and hypnosis, a method so subtle yet so effective that it's been used to influence everything from courtroom testimonies to political speeches. It's not about swinging pocket watches or making people cluck like chickens. It's about shaping perception without resistance. Take the infamous 1970s case of the lost in the mall experiment. A psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus wanted to test how easily people's memories could be manipulated. She told participants a fake childhood story about being lost in a shopping mall, crying, and finally being rescued by a kind stranger. The catch? It never actually happened. Yet many participants remembered the event in vivid detail. Their minds filled in the gaps, creating a false reality, just because someone suggested it. That's the terrifying part of suggestive language. It doesn't need to be true to be effective. It just needs to be framed in a way your brain accepts as truth. Now combine that with hypnosis, and you get something even more unsettling. Hypnosis isn't about mind control, it's about lowering psychological defenses. It puts a person in a state of hyperfocus and relaxation, where suggestions slip in without triggering resistance. In this state, someone can be guided to believe, feel, or even remember things that never actually happened. It works through embedded commands, phrases hidden within normal conversation. A politician might say, "When you step into that voting booth, you'll feel a strong sense of trust in our leadership." The key phrase? Feel a strong sense of trust. It's not an argument, it's a suggestion. One your brain processes without questioning. Marketing and sales use this constantly. A waiter asking, "Would you like the steak or the seafood special?" is subtly removing your ability to say no. The question assumes you're ordering. It's just a matter of what. And then there's the yes ladder technique. Small agreements prime people for larger ones. It's a classic car salesman trick. Start with minor commitments. "This is a nice car, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great to drive something that's reliable?" You'd probably love how smooth the handling feels, right? Each small yes makes the next one feel natural. By the time the contract is in front of you, your brain is wired to agree. But here's where it gets even darker. Suggestive language can be used to alter memories, behaviors, even identities. Cult leaders, con artists, and interrogators all use these techniques to shape narratives. Frame a question the right way, and you can change someone's reality. Police interrogations have led to false confessions using suggestive language. A suspect repeatedly told, "You don't remember it now, but memory comes back in pieces," may start doubting their own innocence. Their mind tries to reconcile the contradiction. Eventually, it's easier to just believe they did it. And once a suggestion takes hold, it's nearly impossible to undo. That's the true horror of it. A single phrase, a carefully worded statement, a slight shift in tone, it can rewrite someone's perception of reality forever. So ask yourself, how many of your beliefs are actually yours and how many were planted there without you ever realizing it? Number 54, pacing and leading. You ever meet someone who just gets you? Someone who seems to be on your wavelength, saying the right things, making you feel like they understand you better than most? You trust them, maybe even follow their advice because, well, it feels natural. But what if that was engineered? What if they weren't just understanding you, but leading you without you even realizing it? This is called pacing and leading, a psychological technique used in persuasion, manipulation, and even mind control. It works by first matching the person's thoughts, emotions, or behaviors, pacing them, before subtly shifting them toward a desired outcome. Done correctly, it makes people agree, comply, or follow, without resistance. Ever noticed how cult leaders, con artists, or even politicians start by mirroring the frustrations of their audience? I know how you feel. You're tired, you've been ignored, you've been mistreated. That's pacing, acknowledging and aligning with the target's current reality. And once trust is established, they begin to lead. And that's why you need to listen to me. I have the solution. Follow me. It's used in everyday life too. Salespeople pace by repeating your concerns before guiding you toward a purchase. Interrogators gain compliance by mirroring body language, speech, and emotional state before steering responses. Even in relationships, someone might first agree with your feelings, making you feel safe, before shaping your choices. And here's what makes it dangerous. It feels natural. The manipulation isn't forced, it's welcomed. You think you're making decisions, but in reality, your choices have been prescripted, introduced so smoothly that by the time you realize what's happening, you're already 2 steps ahead on a path you never chose. Number 55, anchoring bias exploitation. How much would you pay for a cup of coffee? $10? $5? $1? Whatever number popped into your head first. Chances are it wasn't completely random. It was anchored to something. Maybe the price of coffee at your favorite cafe. Maybe the ridiculous $10 figure I just mentioned. But what if I told you that your perception of value, fairness, even reality itself, can be hijacked by a simple trick known as anchoring bias? And the worst part? You'd never even notice it happening. Let's look at a classic example. Imagine you walk into a store and see a high-end watch marked at $10,000. That's absurdly expensive, right? But right next to it is another watch for $2,000. Suddenly, it doesn't seem so bad. Why? Because your brain just got anchored to the first higher price. Even if you weren't planning to buy anything, the comparison makes the second option feel reasonable, when in reality, it's still overpriced. This trick isn't just used in sales, it's everywhere. Ever noticed how restaurants have one or two ridiculously expensive dishes on the menu? Those aren't meant to be bestsellers. They exist solely to make everything else seem affordable. Marketers, salespeople, even politicians all use anchoring to subtly control how you perceive information. But it gets darker. Anchoring isn't just about money. It can manipulate beliefs, emotions, even decisions. Imagine you're negotiating a salary. The company starts by suggesting a figure far below what you expected. You push back, and they generously raise the offer a little. Now, instead of negotiating based on what you deserve, you're negotiating based on the lowball number they planted in your head. And here's where it gets really disturbing. Anchoring is often used to distort reality itself. Let's say a news report tells you that crime in your city has increased by 300%, but they don't tell you what the baseline was. Maybe there was only one case last year. Now there are 4. But by anchoring you to that big percentage, they make the change seem terrifying. Your perception of safety, of urgency, even of what needs to be done, shifts just because of a single carefully placed number. Now think about personal relationships. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone subtly set a standard? Maybe about what's normal in a relationship, how much effort someone should put in, or what's considered too sensitive to be upset about. That's anchoring too. A manipulator might start with an extreme statement like, "You're overreacting." This is completely fine. Even if you push back, your mind starts adjusting to that as the baseline. Over time, what once felt unacceptable becomes the new normal, the terrifying truth. Anchoring bias works because our brains crave reference points. We don't judge things in isolation. We compare them to the first number, idea, or emotion we encounter. And once that anchor is set, breaking free from it is almost impossible. The best manipulators don't need to control all your choices, just the first one. Because once that anchor is in place, the rest of your decisions will fall exactly where they want them to. Number 56, the Pygmalion effect. Imagine a teacher walks into a classroom and secretly believes that half the students are geniuses and the other half just average. Now, no one tells the students anything. No special treatment is announced. Nothing obvious changes, but by the end of the year, something incredible happens. The genius students perform dramatically better than the others. Why? Because expectations alone, not resources, not tutoring, not luck, expectations alone shape their reality. This is the Pygmalion effect. When used intentionally, it can mold people like clay without them ever realizing it. The name comes from Greek mythology, Pygmalion, a sculptor who fell in love with a statue he carved, and that statue came to life. In psychology, it's the idea that what we believe about others subtly reshapes how we treat them, and how they in turn behave. If someone expects greatness from you, you'll often rise to meet it. But here's the dark mirror. If someone expects failure from you, chances are you'll meet that too. Take the famous Rosenthal and Jacobson experiment from the 1960s. Researchers told school teachers that certain students, chosen completely at random, were intellectual bloomers. They were told these kids were about to take off academically. The teachers weren't told to act differently. But they did, without realizing it. They gave those students more time, more encouragement, more patience. And by the end of the year, those random students actually scored significantly higher on IQ tests. Why? Because someone believed they would. Now imagine that same effect being used to manipulate. A controlling boss subtly implies you're incompetent, makes little comments that make you second-guess your abilities. Over time, your confidence erodes, and your performance follows. Or a toxic partner keeps telling you, "You're lucky to have me," until you start believing that no one else would want you. And eventually, you stop considering leaving, even if you're miserable. This is how entire social groups can be crushed under the weight of low expectations. If people are told they're inferior, day after day, generation after generation, they begin to act like it. Not because it's true, but because it was expected of them. The Pygmalion effect doesn't just influence behavior, it writes the script for people's futures. And it's quiet, it's subtle, it's devastating, because when someone else holds the pen and you don't even know it, your life gets written for you. And the worst part? You live it, thinking it was your own handwriting all along. Number 57, time constraints. Imagine you're in a high-end watch store, admiring an expensive timepiece. The salesperson leans in, lowers their voice, and whispers, "This is the last one in stock, and I can only hold this price for the next 5 minutes." Your heart starts to race. The pressure builds. You weren't planning on buying anything today, but suddenly, waiting feels like losing. This is the time constraint technique. It's a powerful psychological pressure tactic, one of the most effective ways to make people act against their better judgment. Because when there's a ticking clock, rational thinking is often the first thing to collapse. The brain registers scarcity as a threat, a fear of missing out, of losing an opportunity that might never return. In response, the body floods with cortisol. Stress levels spike, and suddenly, making a quick decision feels like the only option. Marketers, scam artists, even cult leaders, they all know this trick. By artificially limiting time, they create urgency so intense that people feel forced to act before they can think. This works so well because of something called decision fatigue. When you're under pressure, you lose the ability to weigh pros and cons. So your brain defaults to instinct. You choose the option that feels easiest, safest, and most comfortable, which, more often than not, is exactly what the manipulator wanted you to do in the first place. That's why limited time offers are everywhere. Why car dealerships insist a deal expires by the end of the day, even though the exact same offer will still be available next week. But this tactic isn't limited to sales, it's been used to control people on a massive scale. In high-stakes negotiations, leaders will impose last-minute deadlines, forcing rushed, uncalculated agreements. Cults and extremist groups will tell recruits, "Decide today, or lose this opportunity forever." Even military interrogators have used time pressure, bombarding detainees with rapid-fire questions, forcing answers before the mind can critically process what's being asked. And then there's scam culture. Think of a high-stakes phishing email. You get a message that appears to be from your bank or a government agency. It claims your account's been compromised. You're told you have 10 minutes to respond, or your funds will be frozen. Logically, you know you should verify the message, but the countdown has started. Fear kicks in, and before you know it, you've handed over sensitive information. But here's the darkest part. The illusion of urgency creates compliance. People who would normally resist become highly suggestible under pressure. Studies show that when people believe they're on a time limit, they're far more likely to follow instructions, even if those instructions go against their morals, instincts, or common sense. So how do you resist it? You pause. The moment you feel rushed, step back. Recognize that urgency is often manufactured. Ask yourself, is this really my last chance, or is someone just trying to make me feel like it is? Because here's the truth. When someone pressures you to decide right now, it's usually because they don't want you to think at all. Number 58, the decoy effect. Next time you're about to buy something, stop and ask yourself, did I really choose this? Or was I subtly led to it? Because what if I told you that many of your decisions weren't fully your own, but were carefully engineered by something called the decoy effect? This psychological trick is incredibly subtle and disturbingly effective. Corporations, advertisers, and even political strategists use it to guide your decisions without you realizing it. It works by presenting you with 3 options, but one of them is a decoy. It's not actually there to be picked. It's just bait to nudge you toward a specific outcome. Let's take a simple example. You walk into a movie theater. You're given 2 choices, a small popcorn for $3 or a large one for $7. Most people hesitate. $7 is more than double the price for just a little more popcorn. Now they add a third option, a medium for $6.50. Suddenly, the large popcorn for $7 seems like a steal. That 50-cent difference makes it feel like the best deal. Obvious, irresistible. But here's the thing, you were never meant to pick the medium. It was only there to push you toward the large. This happens everywhere. In subscription services, where a best value plan sits right next to a ridiculously overpriced one. In restaurants, where one overpriced item makes the intended choice seem like a bargain. Even in politics, where a third-party candidate pulls just enough votes from one side to tip the outcome. But this goes beyond purchases. The decoy effect reshapes perception. Have you ever seen a public figure get away with something terrible simply because someone else did something worse? That's the decoy effect. By placing a more extreme alternative next to a bad decision, the original one suddenly feels acceptable, even if it's still wrong. Number 59, the IKEA effect. There's a reason people hold on to ugly handmade crafts. Why parents treasure their child's messy school projects. Why assembling a piece of furniture yourself makes it feel more valuable than a sleek pre-built one. It's not about the quality, it's about the effort. This is the IKEA effect. It's a psychological phenomenon that causes people to overvalue things they've put effort into, even if the final result isn't that great. Named after the furniture giant IKEA, this effect highlights something fascinating. When we build something ourselves, we bond with it emotionally. Studies show that when people assemble an object, they value it significantly more than an identical object someone else put together. The effort creates attachment. And it's not just about furniture, this trick is everywhere. Businesses use it in the workplace. Employees are encouraged to contribute ideas, not just because they're helpful, but because it makes them feel personally invested in the company's success, even when they're overworked and underpaid. It happens in relationships too. One person is made to constantly work for the other's approval. They pour time and energy into the relationship, and that effort deepens their emotional attachment, even if the dynamic is toxic. Cults exploit this ruthlessly. New members are assigned grueling or humiliating tasks to prove themselves. The harder they work, the more invested they feel, and the less likely they are to question the group. The IKEA effect creates a psychological trap. The more effort you put into something, the harder it becomes to walk away. Even if, logically, you should, that's why gamblers keep betting after losing. Why people stay in relationships long after the love is gone. Why employees remain loyal to companies that treat them poorly. Because the mind tells itself, I've worked so hard, this must be worth it. And here's the chilling part. This effect doesn't just apply to objects or people. It can shape belief systems, political ideologies, conspiracy theories, dangerous movements. Once someone has poured time, energy, and part of their identity into a belief, it becomes almost impossible to let go. They'd rather twist reality than admit they wasted their effort. So next time you feel deeply attached to something, ask yourself, do I truly value this? Or have I just worked too hard to walk away? Number 60, the endowment effect. The endowment effect is one of the most insidious psychological tricks because it plays on something deeply personal, our sense of ownership. Once we own something, even briefly, we assign it more value than it actually deserves. Imagine walking into a store. A salesperson hands you a sleek, expensive-feeling pen. Try it out, they say. You scribble a few words, roll it between your fingers. In just seconds, it starts to feel like yours. So when they tell you it costs more than you plan to spend, it feels worth it. Even if you never wanted a fancy pen in the first place. That's the endowment effect. Simply touching or using something tricks your brain into believing you own it. And letting go suddenly feels like a loss. Marketers use this everywhere. Free trials. Test drives. Try before you buy. Deals. All designed to simulate ownership before you've spent a single dime. Because once something feels like it's yours, parting with it feels like losing a piece of yourself. And it gets worse. This trick doesn't just apply to physical things, it's used with ideas too. People grow attached to beliefs just because they've held them for a long time. That's why it's so hard to change someone's mind, even with evidence. If they feel ownership over their belief, letting it go feels like personal failure. The endowment effect shows up in relationships as well. People stay in toxic friendships and draining romances, not because they're happy, but because they feel invested. They've spent years building something, and the idea of walking away feels like losing everything. But that's the illusion. The same illusion that makes an old, broken phone in your drawer feel too valuable to throw away. Cults, con artists, and manipulative leaders depend on this trick. They make you feel like you own your choices, your place in the group, your role in their system, even your pain. And when you feel ownership, escape feels impossible. The deeper the investment, the stronger the illusion of value. And here's the scariest part. The endowment effect still works, even when you know about it. Knowing the trick doesn't stop your brain from falling for it. The only way to break free is to pause and ask yourself, Am I valuing this because it's truly worth something or just because it's mine? Because sometimes what feels precious is just a well-placed illusion.